That was about 10, right? Okay, welcome everybody. We're going to call the Sanford School Department School Committee meeting to order at, was it like 6:35? 6:36. 6:36, sorry, we're a little bit behind. And we'll start out with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, now we have adjustments. Did we want to table the calendar item right now? Or will we do that later? Why don't we do that? Let's, we're going to table item J2, the proposal for the 2021 school calendar to our next meeting. Do I have a second for that? Second, Mr. Rue, any discussion? No discussion, all in favor? All in favor. Okay, tabled. Any other adjustments to the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to approval of minutes. I will make the motion to approve minutes from June 15th, 2020, 5:30 p.m. executive session, June 15th, 2020, 6 p.m. regular meeting, July 20th, 2020, 4:30 p.m. workshop session. Do I have a second? Second from Mr. Rue. Any discussion? All in favor? All in favor. Excellent. Okay, so now we're on to the public comment section. And this will be a little interesting since we're on the Zoom call. I think we've broken through some new technology here. So essentially the way we're going to do this is we're going to ask you to raise your hand if you're on the Zoom and you're interested in making a comment. So how do you raise your hand in a Zoom meeting? You want to click on the participant button at the bottom of the screen. A sidebar will appear on the right-hand side of the screen, and you can click on the raise hand icon. So what we're going to do, we'll go down through everyone that raises their hand. We'll give you some time to talk. This would be the same format as if we had the in-person ones. It's really no debate. We're just looking for you to be able to make a statement as a member of the public. If you want to ask a question in that, you can. We will not be replying to that question, but it will be noted. We also ask that you try to avoid repetition. I'm not sure how many people we're going to have that are interested in making a comment. But if someone else has already said something, maybe try not to repeat that. You can say you agree with them and make another part of the statement. And also, just so you know, I know probably a bunch of people are tuning in for the reopening plan. That will be later in the agenda. Mr. Nelson will be making the presentation. We will not be opening it back up for public comment question after that. Instead, we're going to ask you to please email schoolinfo@sanford.org at that point. Anything I'm leaving out, Mr. Nelson? So at this point, I think we're supposed to have Mr. Boussier or Mr. Williams letting us know who wants to make a comment. Anybody? This is where we're trying it.
John, could I
The
just
person-
say one?
oh.
Oh, sorry. Could I just quickly? I did just get a message saying it was hard to hear at home, so I don't know if
Okay.
just
Some technical feedback for you, Brett. They're saying it's a little harder to hear at home, so maybe turn up the volume for the Zoom meeting if you can.
We are working on that. Thank you very much.
Excellent, Brett. And maybe actually I didn't mention as we kicked off, we are doing this via Zoom, but we have, of course, the school committee here so that we can all be in the same room. And the reason we decided to go this way after much debate back and forth, we just want the community to be able to have as much input and have this as available as possible. So just with the state mandated limitations on gatherings, we decided this was probably the best way to be able to get the most folks in. And we had thought about, if you've noticed, we're in the Performing Arts Center. We had thought about trying to let some people come in here live as well. But with the setup, with the technology and the people that are in here, it really was only going to be like 20 or 30 people. So it just wasn't going to work out. But we did talk about that. So people at home, we're trying to make it as accessible as possible for you. Okay, Brett, who do we have up first?
The first public comment is from Hannah Williams.
Hannah Williams.
There was a lot of feedback there. Hi, I'm Hannah Williams. I have two children in the Sanford School Department. Jonah's going into second grade at Carl J. Lamb, and Gabe is going into fifth grade at the new junior high. My question is, I've been hearing a lot of discussion about a hybrid for five, and sorry, there's a lot of feedback. If you could get your tech guy to work on that. He's my husband, just so you guys know, but that's why I was making a joke. But I just have some concerns with the fifth grade being in the same, lumped into the same group as the middle or the junior high and the high school. The fifth grade class has already seen a lot of changes. The upcoming fifth grade class, they started out either being, in Willard, MCS, Carl J. Lamb, or Lafayette. Last year, or 2018-19, or no, 2019-20, were shuffled to Willard, which was a change that happened kind of at the end of the year, which was a new change for them. And now they're also being asked to go into an entirely new school that's bigger, that's scarier, and barely 10 years old. I just think that consideration really needs to be made for these fifth grade kids. They are not 16, 17, 18-year-olds. They have totally different psychosocial needs than teenagers do. Distant and remote learning is extraordinarily difficult. They do not self-learn. They really will have to have a parent with them at all times, kind of helping them to learn. And that presents its own challenges. So I just think that is something that I would love our school board and the administration to consider, that, these are still young children. They're not high schoolers yet, and they're not even junior high yet. They're not even teenagers yet, or even close. So I think that's all I have to say.
Back to me. Okay, there we go. Hey, thanks, Hannah. Who do we have next, Steve?
The next public comment is from Ed Cormier.
Ed Cormier.
All right. Good evening, school board. My name's Ed Cormier. Live here in Sanford. PTA dad. Got a kid going to Margaret Chase and another one going to the junior high middle school. And I have lots of friends that are teachers. There's been lots of focus on student safety. My big concern is about teacher safety and our teachers being safe in the schools, being able to just function properly. But my comment is more of a petition of the board. I think that you should table public comment, and I think that you should suspend the agenda, move to the COVID presentation so we can hear it, and then have questions to ask on what was presented, because having public comment now before what we know what the plan is does not seem to be productive or conducive. So that's my petition to you. Suspend public comment, go down the agenda, do the COVID presentation, and then come back to public comment.
Waiting. Oh, there we go. Hey, thanks for the comment, Ed. Who do we have next, Steve?
We have Mandy Lancaster.
Hi there. I am a parent of a child that will be transitioning into the third grade at Carl J. Lamb. And I'm here to echo Ed Cormier's sentiment. I really believe that public statements need to be withheld until after we've learned of the reopening plan, so that parents can give feedback accordingly. We are the vital stakeholders, or one of the vital stakeholders in this community, and I think that our voices need to be heard. Thank you.
Hello? We're back up now? Okay, there we go. Thanks for the comment, Mandy. Who do we have next?
Just checking here. We have Crystal Tenney.
Hi, this is Crystal Tenney. There's a lot of feedback again. I'd like to echo Ed Cormier's comment about tabling the public discussions and then leave it open for after we receive the COVID presentation. I have a lot of questions in regards to the distant learning that would apply to our family. So I'd like to save most of my questions for that point of the presentation.
Give it back to me. Thank you for the feedback, Crystal. Who do we have next, Steve?
I believe that's all we have for public comment.
Okay, if that's all we have, Mr. Nelson actually has a list of questions, comments that were emailed in to the schoolinfo@sanford.org email. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Nelson to go through those.
Thank you. These came in after the agenda was sent out with that school info email address. My daughter is headed into second grade this fall at Willard. I am considering the remote learning option this year. What is, or is there, a deadline of when I need to let you know by? Also, how will remote learning be conducted this year? Will it be similar to the 2020 spring, or will it be real-time class instruction from home? Next comment, Superintendent Nelson mentioned more information coming about the fully remote option available if we are in person, but parents choose the fully remote option for their kids. What will the fully remote look like? Who is the person in the district assisting these students? Will there be live instruction or instructional videos? Next comment, many colleges and universities are testing students, staff, and faculty prior to return and ongoing. Is Sanford testing teachers and staff prior to school opening in person? Next comment, what supports are available for children who already had anxiety about school or now going into a very different school setting and situation, especially with reevaluation bi-weekly? Is there a plan on working with them? There may also be increased anxiety in other children not diagnosed with anxiety. Is there a plan or more staffing to support the students and also teachers? Next question, for those kids who had their 504 eligibility meetings canceled in the spring, will a meeting take place prior to school even if it is virtual? Is there enough PPE and ventilation available? What will the school day look like? Socialization opportunities, all academic focused, frequent mass breaks, outside instruction if weather permits. Next questions. Middle school update, is it ready? If not, will there be transition mid-year? If so, how will you prep those kids with difficulty transitioning? Next comment, thank you. I know you're working hard and appreciate you listening to our questions and concerns. Next, if my child attends school and end up positive for COVID, my attorney says that if the school opens and my child contracts this in class, you will be held liable for medical expenses due to negligence. Is this true? Can you briefly describe what PPE is being provided to staff? Are we getting 2 paper masks per week and some hand sanitizer? Next comment, each class and instructor has unique cleaning needs and duties during the day. Is a one-size-fits-all the approach, or are classes looked at by supervisors and department heads individually? As an example, I need to carefully clean keyboards, the mouse, monitors, large desks, and equipment in a CTE setting to accommodate incoming students midday from 7 sending high schools. I need more spray and wipes, etc., than a class that only needs to wipe down desks and the time to do so. Will remote access be available for SRTC programs? What is the deadline for making a decision regarding individual student enrollment for September? How do I indicate a change in my enrollment decision if I have already submitted a survey? Who do I contact regarding a need for accommodations? Hand washing only, no hand sanitizer. Historically, there has been an inequitable amount of prep time for elementary versus secondary teachers. We're now hearing that our prep time will be even shorter due to cleaning between specials. What is being done to make this division more equitable? Tables were purchased for our classrooms, and from what I've been told about the setup, it requires students to be facing each other, breathing in each other's spaces. Is this an issue? From what I understand, the CDC recommends facing the same way to avoid this, but it's not what I'm hearing at the building level as our rooms are arranged. Will in-classroom teachers also be required to teach virtually at the elementary level? We have heard all summer no, but as the year gets closer, who is teaching remote students has not been answered. Who is responsible for cleaning, sanitizing throughout the day in the classroom? There is a long list of teacher concerns generated via the union. Has this document been shared with the administration and school board? Do you plan on addressing every question and concern from staff? Thank you for considering these questions. I know there are no easy answers and appreciate the time put into these concerns. Understanding that the return to athletics is governed by the Maine Principals Association, do local districts have the final decision to play a fall sports season? Will Sanford support a return to play if students cannot be in the classroom 5 days per week? Does a return to play sports introduce an element of risk that could ultimately keep Sanford's most vulnerable students from in-person classroom instruction if an athletic team is exposed to a COVID outbreak from a visiting team and/or while participating at an away competition? Will Sanford work equally as hard to restore all co-curricular activities, aside from band and chorus, as mandated by the CDC, if the district is allowing for a return to play sports? There are definite concerns with the number of students being placed in our classrooms. The understanding is that there will be a 3-foot separation between students, but I think it would be difficult to expect young children to not only stay in their seats all day long without freedom of movement like they are used to, but it is also a lot of bodies in a small, hot space for many hours during the school day. In addition to the number of students, there are concerns about how some of the classrooms are being set up. In some classrooms, for example, tables are being used instead of desks. And in these situations, one student is facing forward on the long side of the table, and one is facing sideways toward the other student on the short end of the table. Therefore, students will be breathing toward each other all day. The research that I've read has shown that students should be facing all in the same direction. At the elementary level, there's a huge discrepancy in the amount of prep times teachers have each day in comparison with middle and secondary classrooms. These are going to be shortened even more to only 30 minutes, compared to 80 minutes at the high school level to allow for sanitizing of specialist classrooms. This also doesn't take into account that teachers need time to escort students to and from the specialist class. 30 minutes is a very short time to provide in order to prepare for the multitude of subjects we are expected to teach each day: reading, writing, math, science, social studies, spelling, language, social emotional curriculum, handwriting, etc. We have concerns about what our classroom instruction would look like based on safety guidelines. Small group instruction, use of manipulatives, movement, etc. are inherent in elementary instruction. When these are taken away, what are the benefits of coming together? That, along with an increased number of breaks during the day for increased hand washing, mass breaks, outdoor snack time, and other things being asked to be implemented for safety, will drastically decrease the amount of time that we can provide instruction to students. We have been told that science is driving the decisions to promote our return to classroom instruction in the fall. If that is the case, why aren't all staff at all grade levels in schools returning with the same school plan? Thank you for consideration of these concerns. I appreciate all that you're doing to ensure a safe start of the school year for both students and staff. There are said COVID-19 funds to help schools get PPE and other required items to help keep schools safe and able to follow regulations and protocols. But have you physically received all of the items to open schools safely? If not, how can you even go forth with reopen?
Okay, thank you to everybody that took the time to email in with questions and comments. Now we'll move on to communications. Mr. Nelson, thank you from Ledgmere. Is that what I see here? You want me to fill a little more? Did you find it?
No, I haven't. Yep. I did want to say before we go into that, we're very appreciative of everyone who is sharing those comments. I'd like to think that we have answers for all of those questions, but the reality is this is something that is brand new for all of us. We're working hard to get those answers. We do have questions that we are working on putting a frequently asked questions document to our website. That was something that we had talked about following our parent evening on July 27th. That has not changed. Right now, there's just, it's a very fluid situation. I think hopefully tonight there will be a situation where questions can be answered, but I also expect that the presentation could also generate some more questions for that.
Okay, thanks.
So, yeah, I do want to read a communication that we did receive from Ledgmere, which is Student Transportation of America. They are the bus company that we contract. They did send a letter to the Sanford School Department addressed to Assistant Superintendent Steve Boussier and our business manager, Administrator Cheryl Fournier, both of who work closely with Student Transportation of America in Ledgmere. Thank you for all of that work. But in their letter, they reached out to say, as the strangest and most challenging school year that any of us can remember draws to a close, we wanted on behalf of our employees, their families, and our community to thank you wholeheartedly for paying invoices during this difficult time. Your financial support and your recognition of the important contribution that our drivers and staff make to your community was critical to keeping them engaged and feeling appreciated. Many live from paycheck to paycheck and their income was severely, suddenly, and unexpectedly diminished. Your continued payment went far in mitigating the loss of opportunities caused by the necessary but painful cancellation of school, with it all the usual extra spring activities. Your support has allowed us to keep our employees, their managers, our fleet, and the facilities that house them ready, willing, and able to serve your students as soon as school is back in session. We look forward to that day when we return. It cannot come soon enough. Again, thank you. We view your support as confirmation of our partnership and our mutual devotion to our community and the employees that serve this community so well. Sincerely, Greg Stinson and Deborah Coleman on behalf of Ledgmere and Student Transportation of America. We very much also want to thank them. They were very instrumental last spring in our transportation to help us with all the different food deliveries that were so critical and so important for our community, that we were able to continue and use their resources throughout last spring.
Yeah, I'd echo that too, Matt. I mean, having the buses for the lunch delivery program was huge. I heard that from so many different families. Okay, so let's move on to committee reports. Construction updates, Mr. Nelson.
Okay, so I'll start with Sanford High School and Sanford Regional Technical Center to give an update. The mechanical engineer was on site to review the compressed air system and the water pressure at the high school. The compressed air was found to have some leaks, which should be corrected. Leaks were not documented during the warranty period and are likely caused by students' rough handling of the system. The pressure valves at the water systems were reviewed and found to be working as intended. The controls contractor, Siemens, has addressed items raised by the Sanford High School facilities department. This has reduced the punch list to approximately 61 items that are now in the contractor's court. The approximate value of the items remain just over $100,000, plus additional charges from architects and engineers of approximately $137,000 due to contractor delays. Current retainage on the contractor is approximately $700,000. This may be reduced to approximately $365,000 to cover the costs noted here if the contractor can execute a requisition soon. It is apparent that some changes above the contract scope that were requested of the contractor will not be accomplished anytime soon. That would include added wiring of a vestibule door at the restaurant entrance and adjustment of the fan in the life skills room to make it quieter. And right now, we're going to be looking at seeking another contractor to perform those small changes for that. We do have an updated punch list that's going to be communicated to the contractor looking for their response. And that's the high school technical center update.
Any questions on the high school tech center? All set? Okay, all set with that, Matt. On to the elementary construction project.
Sure, we'll start with Margaret Chase Smith.
Point of order,
School.
Mr. Chair.
I'll start by saying that we were given substantial completion status last week by fire marshal and code enforcement. So big thank
Point
you
of order,
to
Mr.
all of
Chair.
the team
I have
and
a point of
people who
order.
worked, for that. Update includes the grass on the field outside behind the school. The initial grass planting last spring failed to germinate. Sebago said this is a very common occurrence this summer due to the extreme weather conditions. Our architect has confirmed this with another landscaper. Planting in July would have been worse as it has been too hot. They are scheduled to apply an approved herbicide this Thursday to kill the established crabgrass. They will return later next week, looking to aerate and soil and overseed again. And this is something that the contractor remains responsible for the watering and providing of the established grass. In regards to painting, there was a big push to complete the painting touch-ups that were done last week.
Point of order,
The
Mr.
front
Chair.
canopy was painted this past weekend. Interior touch-ups will be complete today, and the rear canopy will complete next Saturday. In terms of the mechanical, Warren, Train, and Sparhawk are all on site, balancing, completing controls, and they're starting the commissioning process. We look for controls to be completed by the end of the week. A balancing report is due by August 21st, and the owner's commissioning agent is expected to be completed later this month on the 26th. The flooring contractor is scheduled to repair and replace portions of the floor that are not acceptable. Floor 100 in the left wing will be removed and replaced. The cafeteria will need to be emptied in order to fully identify problem areas, and they will be repaired. Other areas throughout the building will be reviewed and tiles will be replaced as necessary. The contractor will need to coordinate this with the Sanford School Department, as one of the corridors will be restricted for 2 days. We expect the plumbing and sprinkler subs to be 100% complete this Wednesday. The electrical sub is complete. The casework has some punch list items. There are some damaged cabinets that they're working on getting replaced. Our access panels are in order. The plant is shut down. The contractor's working on options to have them complete this before we get our final certificate of occupancy. The cleaners are scheduled to return next Monday for the final clean and any areas in all wax of all the repaired floor tiles. The school's playground equipment, the additional playground equipment was delivered this morning. Roofers were finishing up some of the metal trim details also today. The architect has provided the school department with marked up emergency egress plans for review. When returned, the architect will provide graphic maps for each room to be printed and installed in each classroom. These will also need to be installed before the certificate of occupancy. Our delay claim letter is in a review stage and looking for final signature. That should be completed this week. Harriman is awaiting a complete list of punch items from the contractor. This will be issued with the certificate of substantial completion, and we hope that to be able to issue that tomorrow. We do have a construction meeting tomorrow morning where we can review these and other outstanding items. And our architect expects to walk the site again early next week to review where we are with the punch list items and the flooring corrections and the painting touch-ups, which are still needed. And that is the report for, I'll also add that Our furniture for that project has been delivered, and it has been assembled, and it has been delivered to all the rooms. And our group that is overseeing that will be on site tomorrow to be able to review that and make sure that everything is checked out in terms of the consultants that we were using for that.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Any questions on MCS? No, good. Okay, the middle school.
Yeah.
Kendra, sorry.
No, point of order,
I
Mr.
think
Chair.
what people are
No.
most interested in
Point
is
of
it
order.
ready to move in? Will it be ready to move in? When are people going to get into the school? I think that's the burning question for everyone.
Yeah, and so right now, I think with the substantial completion, especially after tomorrow's construction meeting, we'll have a better idea on that. But I'm confident that we're going to be giving the green light on that shortly, probably in the next week or two, where that will be a green light for people to come in and begin setting up.
Okay, so middle school.
Okay, here's an update for our converted middle school project. A progress update. The project continues to make pushes towards the final deadline of August 17th for completion. Based on a walkthrough last Friday, it does not appear that the project will be 100% complete by then, but our contractor continues to state they'll be at a point where the project is complete enough where we will be able to begin moving in. We have got the okay to begin moving in this week in certain areas. We're starting by moving in the 8th grade materials from currently at Sanford High School and Sanford Regional Technical Center, and we'll begin moving those into the 8th grade wing starting tomorrow. The contractor has inspections this week to get areas signed off by the building officials. With the officials signing off this week, the hopes are that the contractor will be able to finalize placing the ceiling tiles. Harriman has been proceeding with the punch listing the building areas that have been ready. These areas include all of the second floor, the classrooms in area B and D first floor, the admin areas of the building, the library, and the gymnasium. Areas that remain that still needs to be punch listed are the site, first floor corridors, locker areas, cafeteria, band room, kitchen, and areas E and F. Our architects will be on site this week to work on the remaining areas. These punch lists will be later in the week based on where things were last Friday. Remaining notable scope items for the remaining spaces appear to be items like building systems, the fire alarm, intercom, mechanicals, ceilings, corridor tile work and painting, flooring, teaching devices and marker boards, locations of the new exterior doors, exterior wall panels, and the remaining kitchen equipment. And that is an update of where we're at. We did have, last week, we did have a core building committee meeting up at the site where we were able to get a tour of the building, also to meet with the architect and Maine Department of Education to get questions answered. Dawn, Kendra, I know that you were able to be part of that tour. Don't know if you have any comments or anything that you'd like to share in terms of that. We did make the decision that we are moving in. We are, the contractors assured that the building will be ready. And so with that, we have made the decision to begin, as I said, moving all of our materials from the current junior high school over to the middle school, and we will start doing that in terms of when the areas, and we'll continue to do that in the areas that are opened up.
If the school board can't hear us right now, this is not a public meeting. This is unsat.
This report or the tour that you were able to see last week.
Kendra, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, I would just say I was encouraged when we went through. I was surprised at the progress since the last time. There were a lot of signs up that say August 17th, telling the contractors they need to be done. That's questionable. I also, when I look at the daily reports, I can really see a lot of progress happening. But I think the same question is in the minds of everybody. When, I know it's not going to be totally complete, but when would be the date that people can get into the building, teachers can get into the building?
Yeah, so right now, the date that people are looking at is August 17th, but I think we're all worried about that being the date to follow through. If that's going to be the case, then this is a very important week for the contractor for us to be able to follow through. I have not had an opportunity to talk with the fire marshal or the code enforcement officer, because they're the ones who would be able to grant a substantial completion, which would allow people to come in and set up rooms. In the report, they're hoping to be able to get that, an update on that sometime this week. But as of right now, that's what we're waiting on. I haven't heard anything different from August 17th, but we still don't have the green light yet. And I think we do have some flashing lights that are telling us that meeting that timeline could be challenging.
Okay. Any other questions, comments on the middle school? No? Okay, we'll move on. Emily, anything Performing Arts Committee?
So in the interest of time, and also because I was unable to attend today, so I do need to get the minutes from Mr. Williams, I will not have a report this evening. I'll save it for next time.
Thanks, Emily. Kendra, anything from WSSR?
This is not a public meeting. This is unsat. Whoever is running the meeting needs to contact the board. This is unsat.
Making a lot of progress, and I think one of the big things we're trying to do is get out postcards to the community by the middle of September to let people know the various ways they can access WSSR programming, so that, especially in these times without a newspaper in this community, that people are able to stay abreast of the news.
Excellent. Thanks, Kendra. Okay, so our superintendent's report. We have no student representative report, of course. Update on the SRO.
Sure. We had what I thought was a very productive school committee workshop back on July 20th, and looking at the school resource officer. I think as we examine that and also look at our policies, I think there's things that we want to do to be able to help improve upon our procedures. I did have a very good meeting with school resource officer Jourdain. I know he's also going to be meeting with the administration at Sanford Middle School also. And I have a meeting, I've reached out to Chief Conley, and we're looking to schedule a time this week that he and I can talk, so that we can kind of review the memorandum of understanding. We really want to kind of beef up areas of that where, in terms of the selection process, the school department has more of a say on that. And then also, in the event that if there is a situation where possibly the SRO may not be working out, that would be something that it would allow options for the school committee, in the school department rather, to be able to exit that agreement. So that's an update of where we are. I hope to be bringing more information forward in terms of helping, especially updating our policy, and also in the areas of some of the procedures around that.
Okay, excellent. Thanks for the update. You got a question down there, Kendra?
Yeah, I have received a few texts from a few people that say the people listening on Zoom cannot hear the meeting.
Gotcha. Oh, is it Zoom? Because I actually heard someone that said it was 26. Maybe they were wrong, because I actually just texted that over to Sarah. Oh, 26 is working fine. Okay.
We can hear you.
So, Brett,
You are
Zoom,
not listening to us.
audio,
I have made a point of order, Mr.
I'm
Chair.
working with Sarah right now. Can stand by just a moment, please?
Yeah, why don't we hold for a minute while we wait to clarify technical issues. You gotta figure out which dial to turn up. On 11, I wonder if it'll be better when Matt does his presentation. Because that's a different mic setup. It's been brought to our attention, we have one participant on the Zoom meeting who is making it pretty much impossible for anybody else to hear what is happening. This is going to serve as your warning to stop disrupting the meeting. If you continue to disrupt the meeting, you will be removed from the Zoom meeting. Okay, let's move on. Oh, so we got a director's report, Cheryl Fournier. You're up next, Cheryl. How you doing, Cheryl?
Good, how are you?
Excellent.
Okay, so CARES, to give you an update on CARES Act. I'll go back a little bit just to give a refresher, because it's been a little while. We got $923,000 for CARES funds, and we've been working on trying to figure out how to spend that money. But we also got $1.3 million in CRF funds, which CRF funds are Coronavirus Relief Fund. And there's a little bit of a different caveat with this grouping. So I thought I'd give a little highlight of that. So one of the big things that's different between the CARES Fund and the Coronavirus Relief Fund is that it has to be spent before December of this year. So it's more for the immediate items. So for technology that we need to do distance learning, to cover urgent needs, one of the items we've thought about is doing cleaning for custodians and trying to get additional custodian help. It would pay for it up until December. And so that 3.1 million, we've been trying to figure out how and what we need. So there's a lot of like, I've got a lot of the schools like needing barriers or sanitizer units, both, stand-up ones on the walls, one in the classrooms, so that all the kids have those to be able to be used. So there's a endless list, and I've been working on it all week last week, fine-tuning it and trying to make sure that we get everything we think we need. Steve announced it off to the 18 meeting and stuff. So now I'm starting to get some of the individual onesie-twosie items to help give kids to know how far 6 feet is, because kindergartners are going to be a little more difficult and the younger groups are a little more difficult, and they're coming up with some creative ways to do that. One of the big items that Beth was working on the past couple of days is the science labs have to have individual units now, because you don't have time to actually wipe everything down in between one child doing it and then the next child doing it. So having some of the goods that you need so you don't have to share a microscope or some form of utensils or whatever you need to do, either the biology or all that science stuff that I did not like during school. Didn't do well in either. So it's trying to figure out those pieces and the individual items that each of the schools need to help the kids be safe. And so we're working on a lot of that the past couple of days. And then on Thursday, we found out we have another CRF fund, which is adult education related only. And it's $13,600, but it's another $13,600 that Nicole is working on, trying to figure out what she can do to make the adult ed safer too. So those are all the pieces that we're kind of working on and going to be submitting all of the applications for that, so that we can get all that money. But the CRF funds are definitely more like the one-time purchases and stuff like that. I kind of highlighted the next item on my agenda list is to talk about COVID hiring. And you might have seen out there that we have 5 part-time, daytime positions for custodial staff. We're going to be we want to put 1 at each school during the day to go around and cleaning, doorknobs, things that get touched, handrails, stuff like that gets touched consistently throughout the day, to have somebody going around cleaning that more often during the day. And then 4 additional full-time evening positions, which 3 of them will be at the high school and 1 at Margaret Chase Smith. And that's to help with the cleaning also in the larger spaces. So all those positions have been posted last week, and those are all school year only positions that we have there. So the CARES Act will pay for majority of that, but we'll have CRF funds paying for the starting of those positions so that we can utilize as much of the funds as we possibly can. So you'll see, but as of right now, we posted those 9 positions. I haven't had anybody apply yet. So I'd like to put a plug out there to try to get people to apply for them. Any questions?
Thanks, Cheryl. Questions, comments, anybody? Kendra, you look like you have a question.
I do. I could have asked after the presentation, but we've seen the draft. One thing I'm wondering about when we talk about cleaning, and obviously teachers are going to be expected to do a lot of cleaning. Have materials been approved and ordered in advance so that we're ensuring that the cleaning sprays, anything that they use has been approved, that it's safe, and that it's in full supply in each of the classrooms?
Ty has ordered a bunch of stuff that's in the process of coming in. I know they've also been cleaning all along, so we do have some of the stuff already on hand. The hand sanitizer and everything were ordered by Ty also in the past couple of weeks. So we have it all, it's all in the process of coming in. If you come into central office, you're gonna see boxes kind of in different spots where we have a bunch of masks and hand sanitizer and stuff that we have already ordered, and it's already in place in the system. So a lot of stuff for the nursing group and stuff.
I'm thinking in terms of when I was, elementary teachers were talking a lot about, from their perspective, they use a lot of what they call manipulatives. The kids are using things, and how do they make sure that those are cleaned and sanitized between kids? And so it just seems like they're going to have something like a spray bottle or something handy to be able to do that. And again, I think it's really important that they're using the same thing and that it's been approved for safety.
Yeah,
So
I'm assuming that's all part of the safe opening, that some of those answers will probably
I didn't hear that.
some of the answers will be done during the safe opening, the presentation that's coming up.
Yeah, you might be skipping ahead to the presentation a little bit, Kendra. So let's see.
Great.
But one of the things we're looking at is like a temperature system where you walk up to it and it takes your temperature, and there's some of those type of things we're thinking about too, that we're in the process with.
Anything else for Cheryl? Good, thanks, Cheryl. I see Assistant Superintendent, no report. Beth's coming up. We're going to wipe down the mic for you.
Okay.
Okay, Curriculum Director Beth Lambert with an update on diversity curriculum.
So in everything that's going on, we didn't want people to think that we had forgotten about some of the really important topics that were brought up earlier in the summer. Mr. Nelson already spoke about the SRO meeting and our next steps for that, and I wanted to fill the school committee and the community in on what we're doing around curriculum in regards to discrimination, diversity, racism, civil rights. So what I did this summer, I sent an email out to our grade level leaders. So those are our leaders from K to 5, grades K to 5, department chairs for the middle and high school, our librarians, our civil rights advisor, and our GSTA advisor. And I asked them if they could identify for me the times and the places where they teach or offer very specific learning in regards to discrimination, racism. And so I've been gathering that information, and I've kind of created a timeline from K to 12 in our curriculum, whether it's social studies or English, and where it takes place, how long the units are, so that we can kind of see a continuum and see where we might need to find opportunities to improve our curriculum. And so my goal is, once the school year starts and we get to a place where things feel fairly settled, we'll start using early release days to work with curriculum and see where we can fill in those gaps and make things a little more interactive.
Excellent. Thanks, Beth. Any questions, comments from anybody else?
No.
Good work. Very exciting.
Yeah, I'll do.
Thanks, Beth. Okay, so now we're on to...
Hey, Dawn, I just got another text that said Zoom could not hear us.
We're still having Zoom sound issues. Anything from the booth?
Stand by.
Here, let's see if, well, the next item on the agenda is the COVID-19 update, initial review of the opening plan, which I know majority of people are tuned in for, and appreciate your patience.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Now, Matt, we're going to be doing this presentation. After that, the school committee is going to have an opportunity to ask questions, like we had said, until we're exhausted of asking whatever questions we have. But we've seen a lot and had lots of conversations with Matt. Will there be an opportunity for the public, if there's time allotted, or will they be sending in questions, emails to Matt with their questions?
Well, the plan, as we discussed, was to not open it back up for public again, trying to keep it a little more organized. So I would like to stick with that plan. They have the avenue of the email to send it in.
Sending them in.
And we're not taking any action on this tonight. This is purely informational at this point.
That's what I just wanted to make sure that everybody understands, because I got a feeling that they're getting, it's probably somewhat heated outside at home. And I just want them to understand that there still is a mechanism for, or there's going to be, for them to get in touch with Matt with their questions.
Correct.
Because I'm not sure they understand that. And that's what I just want to make sure everybody understands. They can get in touch with Matt and send those questions in.
Excellent point, Mr. Rue.
Great.
We are going to let Matt go through his presentation uninterrupted, though, so that everybody at home can kind of get it in one big cohesive chunk. And then we, as a school committee, will be asking questions and comments after. Did you want to add anything, Kendra, or are you good?
Yeah, I just want to be clear to the public that, this plan has been developed over the summer and everyone in, our superintendent, assistant superintendent, administrative team, teachers, they've been working on this. But I think it's important for people to understand that as a school committee, we saw this plan for the first time in a draft on Saturday and have had a chance to review it. So I, for one, would like to have the opportunity I have a lot of questions. And so I think it's important as a school committee, since we're the ones that are going to need to make a decision next week, that we have that opportunity. And I certainly don't want to preclude public comments, but I think it would be helpful if those comments came in writing after the fact, so that they can be incorporated as well. And then finally, I would like to suggest, it's a lengthy document as we go through, and I think it's been organized very well. If in each section, could we ask questions or make comments about that section, so it's not just all general at the end?
I think, personally, I think we should let Matt get through the whole thing, mostly for the viewers at home, so that they can watch it all at once without, because I'm afraid that if we start going down a question comment after one section, we're going to get off too far. So,
Okay.
and in interest of time for them as well. So, and I think that makes a good point. This whole meeting, this presentation is going to be up on WSSR TV for you to review later. So you can watch it tonight, formulate some questions, and if you still have some clarity, you can watch it again. You can kind of get some more clarifying points. So with that said, we're going to kick it over to Matt, and hopefully the audio is a little better up there.
Thank you, Don. If the school committee, if you want to be able to go and get yourselves located in a comfortable seat so you can go up to look at the screen, that may work out better. One thing that we can do here is, as we receive questions on the school info line, those can be things that will be forwarded to the school committee. So that will be able to help you to get an idea in terms of where the questions are, and where the areas are of concern that people may have. I'll start with this slide as a welcome, but you'll see I like the graphic here because this graphic is a puzzle. And I'd like to start by recognizing, and I think that all people do, that this is really hard. This is very challenging. Anytime you have the opening of school, that is always challenging. And now we're trying to open school under the conditions that we have. We've never done it this way before. And so I know I'm very appreciative of people's patience, because we want to do everything that we can to make sure that we're following the guidance to put things into place. I know that everyone is looking for that perfect plan that's going to work for everyone and work for all of our families, all of our students, all of our staff. I'm not sure that that exists. There is not a one size fits all, especially when you start looking at the variety in the various school districts that are around, that there are individual characteristics of the schools. With that, learning is going to be different for everyone. I think it's important to realize that there is going to be disruption with this. There are going to be immense challenges. I want to thank our community. I want to thank our parents. I want to thank our families, our staff. This is very stressful. People are looking for answers. We are not trying to be difficult, to delay or put those off. We just want to make sure that we are taking and making the best decisions possible for that. We realize that this is a stressful time for all for that. We're putting together a plan that incorporates strategies that work together that when you look at those as part of a multi-layered plan, that's going to reduce the exposure and limit the transmission of COVID-19 in our schools. I know as superintendent, I know that keeping our schools closed comes with some massive long-term individual and societal costs. I know that as through distance learning, that does work for families in some situations and some kids, but I know that for many of our kids, they cannot effectively learn or develop, be active, socialize, eat healthy, get support until we're able to open schools that we can reopen. One of the questions that driving us is what can we do to reduce the risk of COVID-19 transmission? I mentioned our risk reduction strategy. Please know that that's different from a goal of achieving 0 cases. I can't stand here before you tonight because there is no such thing as 0 risk in anything that we do, certainly not during a pandemic. So we'll continue to have the evidence and be guided by the Maine Department of Education, the CDC, other evidence that indicates that the risk to students and staff can be kept low if we adhere to strict control measures and be in a position to respond to potential outbreaks. And that's what we're hoping to be able to have a plan that's going to be able to do those things for that. This will be our plan that's going to help guide our decisions around the opening of schools and also how the various educational models may adjust to address any of the pandemic-related issues as they come up. This was something that was developed in consultation with stakeholder groups. I want people to know that it's subject to continued change as new information becomes available. Also, and as conditions within our schools also continue to change. I always start this up in terms of our pillars because this is something that we have that is the foundation for student success. Whether that's our pillars of student achievement, climate and culture, and capacity building, those are things that overarch everything we do. We don't want to lose focus of those in terms of whatever plans that we have in place. Here's a flow chart to be able to come back and show that ultimately looking at developing the plan was coming from a team plus and the central office team. You'll notice that there are groups that can be able to come in there and be able to offer feedback for that. I've had ongoing meetings with our teachers union, public health consultants, our school physician, public safety officials. I've met a couple times with PTA leadership. We did have a parent meeting on recently on July 27th, as we try to be able to come back and look at the plan that is developed by our central office team for that. As we're looking at the reopening of schools, we want to be able to operate quality educational programs. What guides that is a safe environment for all students and staff. We want to make sure we're following the public health guidelines and Maine law. We do trying to do our best to realize the impact on our families and their schedules. One thing that we're trying to do is offer flexibility and choice. And then we also want to make sure that protocols are in place to minimize the spread. There are some assumptions here. I won't read those, but those are assumptions that have been with us, I know, as an administrative team as early as last March when we were working as administrative team, and also in June when we had a 2-day retreat to be able to come back. These are assumptions that we're looking at that also have to be able to guide a plan going forward. When you look at that, there are some operations that need to be modified in how we do business, and you'll see a lot of these throughout the plan in terms of that. Some of the guiding questions for us are when to reopen, who is going to reopen, and also what are the health and safety guidelines and precautions that will be in place but need to be in place. We've identified for us 6 areas. We call them domains, but they really are priorities that fall into the different groups. And we're hoping with those areas that will be able to help us in terms of having the best plan. People are familiar with this timeline. As we're into August, it's time for recommending the reopening plan and a staff return. One thing that we're looking at is a change to the school calendar. We were in a situation where the calendar that the school committee approved last year prior to the pandemic was our first student day was going to be Monday, August 31st. We're now looking at not having a student start any earlier than the Tuesday after Labor Day on September 8th. In terms of reopening, there is a system that's been in place. I want to help people better understand that. The first factor is the counties in the state of Maine and the risk of COVID-19 spread of schools. Back on July 31st, all the counties in Maine were given the green designation. That's a system that's been developed by DHHS and the Maine CDC to categorize counties based on a lot of different assessment data. A lot of that would be recent case rates, positivity rates, and symptoms. That would place things into 3 categories. If you're in the red category, that would suggest that the county has a high risk of COVID-19 spread and that in-person instruction should not be conducted. The yellow suggests the county has an elevated risk of spread and that a hybrid model should be adopted. And then there's the green designation, which suggests that a county has a relatively low risk and that in-person instruction can be adopted, but that's not automatic, because the school department may opt for a hybrid instruction if its buildings or readiness make adhering to the required health and safety measures that are in place for all schools a challenge. So those factors that will be based on primarily are our ability as a school department to implement the following requirements. Okay, and those will be talked about in more detail. Those are our universal safety precautions. This will be done in terms of a check, symptom check before students do a daily check, students and staff before coming to school or boarding a bus. This will be done through an app that students will be able to report through our frontline program. That information will be sent to our school nurse so that they can be able to track those people who do have symptoms to make sure. One thing that's encouraging our people, if you're sick, you're not feeling well, and you have symptoms, stay home. In terms of our staff, they also have to have the symptom check every day. We're working on not having that be part of our frontline app to be able to put that onto our school nurses. We're looking to do that with WorkWell. That's an organization that oftentimes we are having our staff work to when there are health-related issues. That will keep a separation to that and be better for our employees, and also to have WorkWell to be able to guide those checks. Another universal precaution is the physical distancing. Okay, we're asking all of our adults to maintain 6 feet of distance from others to the best extent possible. There is, through the guidelines, that maintaining 3 feet of distance is acceptable between and among students. But the caveat to that is we combine those with the other measures that are outlined in the list of safety requirements for that. And we also want to make sure that there's adequate ventilation. And we got to make sure that the groups and the group sizes, whether that be in our larger spaces or one area, cannot exceed the governor's gathering size limits. Face coverings. This is something where adults, including educators and staff, are required to wear a mask or a face covering. And we have students ages, this should be updated, 5 and above are required to wear a mask face covering and that covers their nose and their mouth. This is something where these coverings must be worn on the bus. Obviously, we've got situations where there could be some alternatives for students who do have medical, behavioral, or other challenges that would make it unable to wear a mask or face covering. That would also same apply to our staff with medical or health reasons for that. Hand hygiene is an important one. It starts with receiving proper training, but then we're going to be able to be washing our hands or using gel upon entering the school, before and after eating, before taking or removing a face mask, after using the restroom, whether people are going out to recess, sharing equipment, and upon entering and exiting a school bus. We talked about PPE earlier. These are additional safety precautions for some of our staff, especially those who are going to be supporting students in close proximity when the distance is not possible or when there's physical assistance required for that. This is also important that a return to school after illness, six students or staff must use home isolation until they meet the criteria for returning to school for that. We now move, those are our instructional, those were our universal safety precautions. I do want to be able to bring up more, I think, of the returning to school option will be something I talk a little bit more about, because I think that's something that we have received a lot of questions about. The first domain that we've come up with, first priority is instructional. It falls in with our pillar of student achievement. So with that, I mentioned before that our instructional plans are based upon the categories that we've already talked about. With that, the red, yellow, and green things that we've talked about. A full distance learning categorization as red suggests that the county has a high risk of COVID-19 spread and that the in-person instruction should not be conducted. One of the things that we heard from our families and our students and our staff in regards to distance learning last year was it needs to be more. And so with that, you'll see that the big things that are going to be different there is attendance will be taken daily. For grades pre-K through 5, that will be done during scheduled check-ins. Grades 6 through 8 will be taken at the beginning of each block based on student schedules. At the high school, will be taken the beginning of each block. And then also you'll be looking at grading and late work will follow the expectations as that are outlined in handbooks. So you can see in terms of grading and late work and attendance, those expectations have been raised. We'll also make sure that the instruction that is delivered is done so appropriately for the different developmental levels. The hybrid blended learning and the outline of the draft, that is a yellow, and that suggests that the county has an elevated risk of COVID-19 and that hybrid instruction model should be adopted. I also want to point out that we could also be in a hybrid option if our county was given a green designation. And that's what our plan is going to be recommending, that we go with a hybrid model. With that, what that would be is grades pre-K through 4. We'll have all of our students attend school 5 days a week, following the safety guidelines. The attendance will be taken daily. Students will follow the curriculum and schedule for their grade level while practicing universal safety precautions. I do want to put this caveat out there because right now we're working hard to make sure that we can meet all of the guidelines. But I do want to say that if circumstances do come up and we're not able to practice the universal safety precautions by having all of our students come back, we could also look at a schedule pre-K through 4 that they would follow a schedule similar to grades 5 through 12. Okay? But those would come with a few accommodations. For grades K through 4, students practicing remote learning would be required to attend morning meetings and check in with the classroom teacher. Students will be provided a daily schedule to use on remote learning days that will include independent learning activities to reinforce learning. And our expectation for the pre-K through 4 students will be expected to complete 2 to 3 hours of learning each day. Now, if that's something where, what if we've had questions to say, if I choose the full distance learning model and I don't have my pre-K through 4 students come to school every day, what would that entail? And so that curriculum, it will cover state standards, but it's going to be delivered through an online learning platform. And if it's okay, I'm going to ask Beth, if you want to come up to the microphone and kind of speak to give people a little bit of an overview about what those learning platforms, the ones that we're exploring.
Sure. So we're currently working with 3 online programs to find the best fit for our students here in Sanford. Each one has its pros and cons, obviously. So we're taking the time to identify what will work for our students. So what are some of the things that we're looking for before we make a decision? The first one is ease of use for students and their parents. The second is making sure that they offer engaging lessons and activities that teach to our standards. Identifying if other materials are needed for students to complete projects like scissors, glue, paper, things that might be a cost associated with parents. We want to really take that into consideration. Role and requirement of the assigned school department member in supporting our fully remote learners. And finally, how the attendance and grading operate within the program. So our final decision will be based on what is best for our students and their continued instruction as part of the Sanford School Department. At this time, we haven't made a complete decision, but we have narrowed it down at least to 3.
And I do want to add that one of those models is also one that's being offered by the state of Maine. That is not going to be released until early September. And so that does create a challenge because that is new and that's something that's unknown to us. And we are not comfortable. We're trying to learn as much as we can about it to help us in our decision-making process. But I think I want to point out that if you are looking at K through 4, pre-K through 4 with a full distance model, that is not something where if our teachers are going to have all of their students in front of them 5 days a week, they are not going to be able to deliver also the online learning component for the full remote students. Okay, so I think that that's important to be able to understand that parents will be expected to help their child maintain attendance engagement in the daily curriculum. And that's something that we're going to be able to come back and look for with that. Do I have the screen shared to show the PowerPoint? Yep, thank you.
Viewers at home, yep.
Yep, thank you. Good, thanks, Brett. So with that, I do want to point out with the programs that we are looking at that the students will still continue, if you're in a full distance learning, to continue to engage in learning in all content areas, literacy, math, science, social studies, also the allied arts in the areas of art, music, physical education, and health. There will be a Sanford School Department staff member who will monitor progress. I point that out that they'll be monitoring progress. They will not be expected to be able to teach. We'll probably want to know that students who have the full distance learning option will only be allowed to switch from the full distance learning to in-person learning or the hybrid option at the end of a trimester for grades K through 4. Okay. Now, if there are people who start out with the in-person learning, they'll be able to transition to distance learning at any time. They don't have to wait to at the trimester break. The hybrid model for grades 5 through 12, okay? I do want to start with our Sanford Regional Technical students. They will attend all of their classes on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. Okay? For the SRTC students, I do want to point out that Wednesday will be consistent with our 5 through 12 schedule, and I'll have more to say about that momentarily. On the hybrid model, our students in grades 5 through 12, all students will attend school. They'll follow following the universal safety precautions under the following schedule. We're going to divide students into two groups, an A group and a B group. The Group A students will attend school physically on Monday and Thursday. Group B students will attend school physically on Tuesday and Friday. Both Group A and Group B will be expected, when they're not in person, to also participate remotely with the other groups. So for example, when Group A is there Monday and Thursday, our Group B students will be using Google Meets or the Google Classroom to be participating remotely, synchronous learning right at that same time. Attendance will be taken daily for both in-person and remote learning. As I mentioned, on those remote days, students will be expected to be engaged in virtual instruction via Google Classroom. If you're a student in grades 5 through 12 and you choose full distance learning, you'll be expected to attend your scheduled classes. You follow your schedule, your daily schedule, and you'll do that via Google Meets on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. Attendance will be taken during each block. We point out here that students will only be allowed to switch from full distance learning to in-person learning in the hybrid option at the end of the semester in grades 5 through 12. I say that because we've got to go into all these plans to be ready for the in-person learning, that we can't have people switching into that all the time, okay? And that's going to be able to help us be able to put that option safely. About Wednesdays for grades 5 through 12, that's going to be a remote day for everyone. Grades 5 through 12, that will involve everything from our focus for activities for the full distance learners in terms of planning for that, preparation. There could be student meetings that take place specifically for our full distance learners. We'll also be talking about social emotional learning activities will take place with that. You saw that with some of the questions earlier in terms of the impact emotionally and socially for students. Also counseling activities, intervention services. It'll also be an opportunity for our gifted and talented English language learners, etc., to be able to get extra support and help. There'll be some extended planning time for the distance and in-person learning, as well as professional development. And into the hybrid model for grades 5 through 12, the grading and late work will follow the expectations as outlined in the handbook. In terms of green, okay, we're calling this a full return. We're being consistent in aligning this with the Maine Department of Education. So to repeat, the green designation suggests that the county has a relatively low COVID-19 risk and that in-person instruction can be adopted, although a school department may opt for hybrid instruction if its building or readiness make adhering to the required health and safety measures for all schools a challenge. Now, in our situation, if we are able, through pre-K through 12, if all those health and safety requirements can be met, then that's when we'll return to school 5 days a week. SRT students will follow their regular schedule. We'll follow the CDC, DOE, and governor's laws and safety guidelines. The attendance, grading, and late work expectations will be exactly what's outlined in the student handbooks. On a green model, if a parent chooses the full distance learning model in grades K through 4, remember that curriculum will cover state standards, but it's going to be through an online learning platform. Parents will still be expected to help their child maintain attendance engagement in the daily curriculum, and students will continue to engage in all of the different content areas, and a Sanford School Department staff member will monitor the progress. And students will only be allowed to switch from the full distance learning to in-person learning with a hybrid option still at the end of a trimester or semester. One thing we wanted to point out, this was something that came up in the parent information night that we did, comparing the different learning options, because these make sense to us as educators, but they may be for staff, for parents and families, they may not understand that. So a distance remote learning with the Sanford School Department, that's provided and funded by the Sanford School Department. The educational needs of the students still remain the responsibility of the Sanford School Department in cooperation with parents and guardians. Students are supported by a Sanford School Department staff member. The technology is provided to families by the Sanford School Department. And the education needs of distance remote learning with the Sanford School Department ensures a continuance of the identified services that we already have, including EL, GT, Title I, and special education. So homeschooling is different. That's provided by the student's parent or guardian. That's funded by the parents. The homeschooling is overseen by the Maine Department of Education. Homeschooling curriculum is provided by the student's parent or guardian. Homeschooling students' technology needs are provided by the student's parent or guardian. And the educational needs of homeschooling students still remain the responsibility of the parent or guardian. Now, there's also out there some online public charter schools. This is mainly at the secondary level in grades 7 through 12. But there's one of two online charter schools, the Maine Virtual Academy, grades 7 through 12, or the Maine Connections Academy for grades 7 through 12. Those options, the online public charter schools, those are overseen by the Maine Department of Education. The curriculum is provided by an online provider that's contracted by the parent or guardian. The technology needs are provided by the student's parent or guardian. They may be eligible to borrow technology from the charter school. And the educational needs of homeschooling online options, students remain the responsibility of the parent or guardian. So I think it's important to be able to look that out, because we know we have a lot of families that right now are doing their best to evaluate their situation, also evaluating what we're doing as a school department in terms of trying to pick out the best option for their family. One thing that's really important in our plan is student and staff start dates. And so you'll see this is a lot of asterisks that are out there. You heard earlier, if you were following in the meeting when we talked about construction. We are one of those school districts that is right in the middle of construction. In terms of next year, we will be reopening Margaret Chase Smith School. We're also moving from Sanford Junior High School to Sanford Middle School. That means our 8th grade are moving from last year's home at the high school and technical center to the middle school for that. One of the things that we're looking at is we are saying that the first day of school is going to be September 8th, but we're also wanting to make sure that we have this opening done correctly and not rushed. And so some of the things that we're looking for are more of a staggered approach. So for example, it'll stay the same for our staff. The new staff, they'll come back for their return on Tuesday, August 25th. Well, their new staff arrival. I don't think they're returning, they're new, so they'll be arriving. And then all of our staff will still come on Wednesday, August 26th, and Thursday, August 27th. In terms of our pre-K and our kindergarten, those screenings will be done August 31st, Monday, Tuesday, September 1st, Wednesday the 2nd, and Thursday, September 3rd. We're looking at having the first student day for kindergarten and pre-K to be on Thursday, September 10th. Okay, that'll be a day that they are the only ones in the school That's a hard adjustment for our kindergarten students as they come in. We recognize that. This year, it's going to be especially different with the protocols that we're putting in place. For those students in grades 4, we're recommending that the first student day be September 8th only for grades 1 and 3. Okay, rather than bringing everyone back, knowing how these protocols are going to be different, we'd like to go back with grades 1 and 3 on that Tuesday, September 8th. The following day, we will bring in just grades 2nd and 4 on September 9th. In grades 5 through 8, remember, in that model, we have a group A and a group B. So in that model, for group A, we're only going to be bringing in grades 5 and 7 on Tuesday, September 8th. The first student day for group A will be, for grades 6 and 8, will be Wednesday, the 9th. The first student day group for B, the group B group, will be done for grades 5 and 7 on Thursday, September 10th. And the first student day will be done for group B for grades 6 and 8 on the 11th. Same thing for grades 9 and 12. The first student day, group A grades will be 9 and 11 on Tuesday, the 8th. For those students in group A in grades 10 and 12, that'll be Wednesday, the 9th. And then the student day, group B for grades 9 and 11 will be Thursday. And the student day for B will be Friday, September 11th for grades 10 and 12. This allows us to come in. This will be allow things to go over those procedures. It will be releasing technology. We feel this is the best option in terms of being able to bring our kids in gradually. Remember, Wednesday is a remote day for grades 5 through 12. It's still going to be an early release day for grades pre-K through 4. But that first Wednesday early release and that first Wednesday remote day will not be until Wednesday, September 16th for that. So that's what we're looking at in terms of the instructional domain. Now we move over to the operations. And so in order for us to be able to meet these guidelines, you're going to see cleaning and disinfecting of buildings and classrooms. Cheryl in her report talked about the disinfecting of the high-touch areas. We're going to be removing any of those things from classrooms that cannot be easily cleaned. There's going to be a lot of signage in terms of standing spaces for people, one-way directions, signs posting to be able to help and remind people of the distancing, the face coverings, hand washing. We're also going to be planning vehicle traffic flow drop-off and pickup logistics as needed. As also mentioned, installing plexiglass shields in those high traffic staff areas, and also setting up the additional hand washing and sanitizing stations. If we're going to be able to meet those universal precautions, we have to be able to come back and do those. We've also put together staff return to work guidelines. These are stuff that many school departments have come and been able to work together with. They've also been, legal counsel has also been able to check to make sure that these are being done in a way that are just basically ensuring safety for all of our students to be able to come back, because ultimately what we're trying to do is minimize the risk of possible transmission between people. There's a lot of different prevention measures that we're also going in for that. That's everything from how we limit restroom use. We're going to ask students to only bring things to school that they need. We're reconfiguring the classrooms to make sure that we can get that physical distance. We're looking at that with a 3 feet with the mask and the other guidelines in place. We're also looking at being able to separate people's belongings. School's going to have to be different. Our curriculum nights, open houses, and back to school events, they're going to be done differently, oftentimes facilitated virtually. You're not going to see the large gatherings, assemblies, or field trips. Those are some of the other prevention measures. A big one in the operations is transportation. I can't stress enough that we want to encourage our families to drop off and pick up their children at school to try to reduce the number of people on the bus. We haven't got the official word yet from the Department of Education. All signs are looking at the most people we could have on a bus are probably about 1 to a seat. 26, you may have some family members who could share seats. So there's things that we have to do. That would be assigning of seats, face coverings for the drivers and monitors. Students will need face coverings to ride the bus. They'll be sanitizing the hands upon getting on and off the bus. We're going to have windows open where available, and then there'll be the cleaning of the buses afterwards. Another part of operations is food service. We'll follow all CDC standards, also including the safety precautions that I've already outlined. What you're going to see is increased cleaning, more ventilation. We're going to reduce the number of students in the cafeteria by using alternate spaces, minimizing the handling of things as whenever possible. You're not going to see the self-serve options anymore. There's going to be the serving of individually packaged meals and dining utensils to students, and a lot of we'll be using disposable food service items for that. While you're eating, we're now going to be 6 feet apart because you can't eat with your mask on. We're not going to allow students to share food. For that, we want to make sure that the proper hand washing is done before eating. For that. Also, we had questions around the shared objects. So we're going to have to really discourage the sharing of those items that are not easy to clean or disinfect. We're going to keep people's belongings separated. We're going to ensure adequate supplies of the high-touch materials to the extent possible. We're going to have to make some changes and adjustments in this area, and we're also going to have to be able to clean following the disinfecting guidance with that. And if we are going to be in a situation where there is the sharing of materials, hand washing has to be part of that. Playground use, still going to be allowed in designated equipment and supplies, obviously under supervision. The use of the face covering, the shields are not going to be required during this time as long as the physical distancing is maintained. There will be limits on the number of people on equipment. We also can't go past the executive order of how many people allowed. In this case, it's now been moved up to 100 kids or 100 people. And then obviously hand washing before going to recess and coming back will be necessary. One thing I didn't point out earlier around the face coverings, those are a requirement, but at the same time, there's going to be a lot of breaks that have to be built in to be able to allow that to be able to happen. There's also a lot of energy around athletics and co-curricular activities. Obviously, that's something that there's some questions around that and what the main principals association who's guiding that. I know that there's been a lot of work that's being done. We're trying to do their best to be able to have sports, but obviously they're going to look a lot different. Enhanced controls. There are advantages for sports, unlike in school, because the majority of our sports in the fall are outside. Obviously, they'd have to limit time spent in close contact. Same thing around shared equipment. You'll see probably if athletics are a go, that schedules are going to be modified. Game attendance is probably going to be restricted in some way. And everything's going to be done to be able to see how we can reduce risks and wear masks and face coverings wherever possible. With the extracurricular activities, obviously in red, if we're in a situation of red, those would be done remotely. If we're in a situation where it's yellow or green, they could still be done remotely or in small groups, but please understand in these areas that the same safety protocols that will be used during the school day will also apply. We've got some guidelines for parents and volunteers, in terms of us trying to minimize any face-to-face meetings. But if people do have to come in, they're going to have to follow the same screening questions that we're asking of our students and staff. There'll also be face coverings, sanitizing, and also people will be in and out once their business is taken care of for that. School nurse clinics are also a big part of this. You're going to see our nurses wearing the PPE regularly. With that, they're going to be a symptom screening tool before reporting to school. I mentioned that earlier. If we do have students and staff at school who are displaying symptoms of infection, they're going to be separated from healthy students and staff in a location, okay, in a different location. Same thing, if we have people waiting to be sent home, there'll be a designated quarantine area. We're going to have to obviously sanitize in terms of the nurses clinic. Same thing with commonly touched surfaces for that. And that's it for the operations. Our next priority, our next domain is facilities. For us to be able to do that, we've talked about the cleaning guidelines, the high touch areas, removing of furniture, the spacing of that, and the signs. One thing that I want to highlight in this area is the upgrading of the ventilation systems in the district's buildings to improve air quality. That's where we're prioritizing control strategies, ventilation, filtration, supplemental air cleaning, and making sure that the system is performing the way that it should and regularly. That's everything from our new buildings, the high school and the technical center, Margaret Chase Smith School, all the way down to our older buildings. I did walk through with our facilities and maintenance director and assistant director. We also had a gentleman come in who's also got these upgrades. Ty and Rob are meeting with him on Wednesday so that we can be able to make a significant investment in terms of the air quality that's going to be going on in our schools. The other thing that we're looking to do is purchase tents. So that will provide additional outdoor space for our students to be used in a variety of ways for that. So that's what you're going to see, a big emphasis on our facilities. The other next domain, next area of priority is student support. You'll see the various areas there. With that, for us, it doesn't matter what the learning model is, okay? As we can come in and look at that. We're obviously following the Maine Department of Education in terms of what the PPE requirements will be for that, but we'll have a process that's in place in terms of what those things may be for the PPE equipment to allow people to do their jobs. Remember, we're trying all of our K through 4 students, the goal is to have them come back every day, so they'll follow their schedules and their IUP will be implemented as written. Our students in grades 5 through 12 who receive instruction in a self-contained setting, those students will attend their program all days that school is open. And so that'll be Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday for grades 5 through 12. If you're a grades 5 through 12 student who receives specialized instruction in content areas, specifically math and reading in resource room programs, they will also attend school all days that it is open Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. We do want to put out though that the in-person option may be limited in terms of staffing and transportation. Grades 5 through 12 students who, if they opt out for the full distance learning, they're going to need an IEP meeting to review their current IEP and the feasibility of implementing distance learning. We do recognize in special education that some of our programs and some of our students will require work that's very challenging for the 6-foot social distancing requirement. And in these cases, face coverings must be worn with face shields optional. In terms of other factors there between plexiglass for those who have to sit closer together, as well as the face shields. We're looking for a lot of those meetings to take place via an online platform if those safety guidelines from the CDC can't be followed. Also under this domain, we have our English language learners. For that support, they are going to spend the majority of their school day in regular education classes, follow the established grade level structure. The regular education teachers will administer and monitor assignments for students during the distance learning. And then our ELL staff for the district will support the academics in the regular education setting, monitor the student work, and also communicate with families in regards to needs. You'll also see gifted and talented offer oftentimes in the same way. GT teachers will still work with classroom teachers to provide additional supports and resources for students to maximize access to academic content. You'll also can see in some situations where on Wednesdays for grades 5 and 12, where you'll see a lot of English language learner and gifted and talented support. Title I reading and math will follow the traditional small group lesson format for students for in-person learning for that. So that's everything in terms of our online math program. And in that situation, our Title I teachers will monitor and support students accessing those programs. Our next domain that we're looking at is technology. Right now, we're still going to be one-to-one, so all of our students receive a school-issued device that's going to be programmed for them to access the sites and applications that are for their particular grade level. In those events that we've got where there are some issues that come up, we've got those taken care of. And right now, we are going to be making arrangements for students without internet access or families who may have limited access. We asked them to reach out with us so that we can be able to help with that. We do have resources to be able to help with that. The learning platforms that we're going to be using for the grades pre-K through grade 3, you'll see in pre-K teaching strategies. Kindergarten through grade 3, we'll use Seesaw, and the video conferencing platform we'll use is Zoom. Right now, grades 4 through 12, that learning platform will be Google Classroom, and the video conferencing will either be Zoom or Google Meets. I talked about social emotional learning. That's also important to us. That's also going to be a domain of itself. Our school counselors and social workers, we realize that in these times, these uncertain times, that our students are going to have some challenges that are going to increase anxiety and stress. And so we'll continue to provide those resources to support that. We do have a district-wide focus on this. That could be done individually. It could also be doing in small groups. With that, we do have resources and support available. Those are our domains. The next part we want to talk about is, all right, the school committee will be tasked with approving our plans, but also being able to also decide what our option, what we're going to start the school year out in. But what happens if there are things that come up and we have to maybe go from our yellow to a red situation or green to yellow? How does that happen? Who makes that decision? And so ultimately that will fall to the superintendent. There's not going to be a single metric that's going to be used. There's going to be circumstances that come up that have to be evaluated individually with a lot of other conditions, both inside and outside of our schools, so we can determine the safest operational level. Some of those things that I'll be using are the DHHS and CDC's counties risk in terms that's updated every 2 weeks. Currently it's green, but it could change. We'll also look at the number of active cases within the Sanford community, the number of possible cases, individual with symptoms but no positive tests within classrooms and schools, the number of positive cases of COVID-19 within a classroom in our school. I think it's also important that we have to understand the number of staff that are able to report to work. That could be a situation where we may not have the staff available to support the model that we have in place. We also want to make sure that for all that this plan has, that we can deliver on it. So that's everything from our PPE equipment, for example. We want to make sure that we have those in place. There are some things that right now are on back order, for example, and a lot of that is because the primary focus is the medical field, but we want to make sure that we have that stuff as well. And then obviously the CDC, our school physician, are also going to be resources to help guide us as well. So if we're going to be going between red and yellow designations or moving from a green directly to red, there's going to be very little time required to have to reset our classrooms and learning experiences. So we could make those moves relatively quickly. However, if we were looking to go from yellow to green or from green to yellow, there might be some adjustments that have to take place with that. And we may need some time where we might not be able to pull people in directly to do that. Okay, so that's going to be something that, as part of this plan, we want to be able to be agile and able to be well positioned so that if we have to, we can move quickly. So, I know that was long. I appreciate people being able to hang in with that. At this time, we'll be looking at, I can come back down and we can, at this time, go and look at if there's going to be any questions or feedback that the school committee would like to put in place.
Thanks, Matt. We'll give you a chance to rest your voice now for a little bit. Kendra, would you like to start off with questions, comments? If you're going to work my way down the line.
Well, okay. I'll start with the DOE guidance. I kind of separated it out as I was looking through the draft we got. My major question is it possible the state might issue recommendations for all districts in each county so that there's a uniform approach? I personally would like a little more direction, county-based by the CDC and the governor. And also, might we consider postponing school start for a few extra weeks to give time for tourists to leave and see what the data looks like? Perhaps distance learning could start on the 8th for everybody, with teachers delivering education from the classroom with no students present.
Sure. So the first one was, I'm not sure you're going to see more guidance coming from the Maine Department of Education around those categories. I think they've couched it in a way that realizes there's a designation, but there's only that one piece. And then there's going to be the other factors as a school department that you have to be able to put into place. I'll use the example of Acton School, for example. Both the Acton district in Sanford is in York County, but Acton is much different than Sanford is in terms of their size of their school and their facilities. So there might be some things that they might be able to do that we may not be able to do. And it's similar, I think, if you look at throughout York County, there are some of the school districts that are smaller than us. So you're probably wondering at home and also wondering, hey, why don't we all have the same plans? And so you'll see that there is some consistency from that, but there's so many factors that are unique to different school districts that you're going to probably see where there's something that put into flexibility before they would come back and be able to push that. In terms of a single designation for everybody. I will say that through this, As a group, York County Superintendents, we are meeting every Friday at 8 a.m. We have been consistently. And what you're seeing, though, is probably more of alignment amongst the groups of trying to be able to come back and work together for those areas that we can, realizing that in some areas there might not be. You talked about maybe starting distance learning, and that's something that we've considered and looked at. One thing I would point out for us that we took into consideration was last year on March 13th, when we made the decision to go distance learning, we were able to do that because we were well positioned at that time because our students, our staff knew our students knew our staff. We put a big emphasis on developing those relationships. One thing we'd have right now, in most cases, all cases, it's all new. And so it's hard to be able to do that distance learning option. And one thing that you'd be looking at is how do we get the technology in people's hands to be able to get that coordinated. So I would look at it that I think if we continue to monitor our data in the Sanford area and it continues to be strong, I would be able to look at, I think, a hybrid model of coming back of what we looked at in terms of a slow bringing people in are going to allow us to be able to, A, make sure that we're being safe, have some of those controls limited, and also help us build those relationships in the event that we may have to, down the line, pivot to a red designation to go completely online. And I think that's something that, as we look at, that would be challenging for us. Now, it'd be challenging, but if we do have designations that come up in the next couple of weeks before we start school, we may have to pivot to that option in terms of, depending on what our data, for example, that could be able to swing and take the decision right out of our hands.
Anything else, Kendra?
I'll give others a chance to ask some.
Circle
I
back.
have a lot more questions, but I want to give others a chance.
Emily, why don't you go next?
Yes. So, yeah, I too have a lot of questions, but I'll start with the ones that are fresh for me. I too had that concern with why not starting a couple weeks at distance learning for everyone. So thank you for answering that, and Kendra for asking. Looking at the hybrid learning plan and breaking it down for grades pre-K to 4 and getting them back into school 5 days a week. If a parent chooses the full distance learning, that's a tough one. I'm recognizing how tough that's going to be. Putting my parent hat on for a second, it would be tough for me to make that choice at this time, especially when the curriculum hasn't been chosen. So I just want to recognize that. I also, I think I heard you say that a teacher may not necessarily be, well, a teacher would be assigned, but it would be maybe a teacher's aide that would be kind of helping out with the hybrid, with the full distance learning?
It could be, Emily. We've chosen that because I don't want people to automatically assume that it is going to be a teacher, or it could be the particular teacher that they've been assigned, that if they were in in-person learning that they'd have. I wanted to be pretty explicit with that, that's not going to be the understanding with that. I do recognize exactly what you're talking about in terms of a full distance learning and what that platform is. I think our hope is, as we gather more information on that, we do want the school committee input also in terms of the platform that we're going to be able to choose, so that could be forthcoming. Because I agree, I want to be able to make the decision that's best for my family, the best for my child, and I want to be able to have everything at my disposal to kind of know that. But I wanted to at least put out there that it's going to be something that is not going to be done by the student's teacher. Okay, I think that's something that as we look at that, I do know that the other thing that we're going to be releasing here is, for us, we also need, at the same time, we also need to know for some certain areas, we will be sending out a form. This isn't really a survey. This is an actual form now that we're going to ask all of our families to return to allow us to know what their intentions are at this time. You may have had some people who were not planning to send people back to school, but now that they've seen the plan, they may be reconsidering. You may have others who, after they saw the plan, would be saying, no, I want the full distance learning. So we're going to be sending that out. We're going to have that deadline also tethered beyond the school committee decision. So right now, if we decide tonight what our next meeting is going to be, say the next meeting is going to be next Monday, a week from now, we would be sending that survey out, that document out now for feedback, because there are some families, I think, who know right now, but there's going to be others that want to wait, and we'll be able to have that outline, that being done so that people can get more information about what that learning platform is going to be to make an informed decision. So, for example, if we do have the school committee meeting next Monday where a decision is going to be made, we'll have those forms to be returned probably by the following Wednesday, that Wednesday, okay? Because we do know some people can come back now, they may already know. And those are going to be what we're looking for in that is going to really help us in the areas of transportation. How many people know that they're going to need to take the bus, or how many people know that they're not going to need to take the bus? That's going to be helpful for us. How many people know that they're not coming back to school? They're either going to be doing a full distance learning, for example. That will help us plan our classrooms that way. Grades 5 through 12, we're going to ask students, do you want to be in group A or group B? Because we can't guarantee everything, but that's going to help us because we want our families that might be working together. We've talked about that. You saw some of the questions or concerns that we had tonight, especially around our middle school students, grades 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay? It may not be the ideal option to have them in school 2 days and home 3 days. But if they can coordinate with other people and other families, for example. So that's what we're going to be able to do, because that information does need to help us, because it is going to be able to have to guide us in terms of how we're going to be prepared when people come back.
Shifting focus briefly on to the 5 through 12 hybrid. It sounds like, so if I'm group A student and I'm attending school physically Monday and Thursday, on Tuesday, I'm attending distance learning, following my block schedule. And is it with Google Meets that, am I gonna have a live feed into the classroom or no? Yes, great, I love that.
What you're not going to have is I get to sleep in till 1 o'clock that day.
Right. So Monday I'm coming here. If I'm a high school student, I'm coming here Monday. Tuesday I'm still getting up, same time. I'm attending all my classes via a live feed in those classrooms. So that begs me to ask, why, if you're choosing full distance learning for pre-K through 4, why is not a live feed option available for them?
Because one of the things that we saw is those students being back every day, it's going to be hard for our teachers to be able to meet those needs of the people that are in front of them and also doing that distance-wise.
Okay.
In high school, you'll know, and we talked about some of the concerns about the schedule differences, there's going to be time given to teachers 5 through 12 to be able to help be able to deliver those needs so it can be a quality experience. But right now, that's not an expectation we want of our pre-K through grade 4 teachers to be able, especially if you're there every day with students that are in front of you at those age groups, to also come back and be able to be responsible for the distance learning.
That's all I have. That's not all I have for questions, but I'm going to stop right there for a moment. But I did just want to say a blanket statement that I was, I was listening to your presentation. I was fully paying attention, but I have had a child in the school district. She graduated this past June. I'm completely kind of, this is a new format for us, doing Zoom, us in person, Zoom, for the public community. So I'm kind of blissfully unaware of what's happening, but I can imagine being a parent, and I think maybe parents didn't understand this is also a regular school committee meeting. So it wasn't just a meeting dedicated to the reopening of school. We had many other things on our agenda. And so, as with any school committee meeting, our public comments are in the beginning of our meeting. So I can recognize the frustration, but I also urge that now, after hearing the reopening plan, and maybe we did a disservice to not let parents know that what was being presented tonight is probably not much different than what they got on info night. Probably bulkier in information, but maybe not much different. But I encourage everyone that expected to have some public comment or participation after Matt's presentation to certainly please email schoolinfo@sanford.org with any question that you or concern that you have after now watching this.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. Mr. Rue?
Well, I was actually going to close with that statement, but I just want to echo the same thing that Emily just said, is that I want to make sure, Matt, that every parent out there gets an opportunity to speak, or when I say speak, send an email to us, and we should get back to them before. And we had talked maybe about not having that meeting next Monday, pushing it off to the following Monday. And if we have to do that, I think we should. To make sure that every parent at least has their questions answered.
And I'll jump in because I think, Emily, as you pointed out, that this is also a regular school committee meeting.
Right.
And so I'll also say that we, when we're looking at where we are in the school department, as much as this is all encompassing, there is a lot of other things that are also coming in. And I know that whether it's our teachers union in terms of the questions that they're developing, I don't want to be not responsive to our people, but I also know that the volume and the numbers that we are getting are such that it could be, and I'm not trying to shirk my responsibilities, but I just want people to know that it's not as simple in some items that we may be getting just a few emails. This is something that we're coming back that is impacting everyone. There's a lot of questions. The hope is that some of this was going to be able to help in that regard with that. But I just wanted to mention that it's not trying to purposely not answer people's questions.
I never thought of that at all, because it actually, the presentation tonight was well done. I'm sure it did answer a lot of questions for a lot of people. But the other question I had, and this is something that we see coming across the country, and I would say, I don't want to wear a mask. What's the ramification?
Sure. Yeah. And so one of the things that we talked about is those are required. And so
both student and teacher.
Yeah, of the staff. Okay. Good. And that's something that at the end of the day, we're going to have to develop protocols and procedures that are consistent district-wide. And that's going to have to be something that we're going to be able to know that if we're going to have people that are not going to follow that, then at the end of the day, and when I say that, they knowingly are not going to follow that, because I know for me, this mask now, for example, has become second nature to me. But it certainly wasn't when I first started. I'd walk out of my office and I'd have to turn around to go get it. I'd walk back to my car. And so we realize that there's a learning curve that's going to come back, but there isn't one of those things to say, I don't want to do it, because there is the enforcement that is the superintendent. If there's anything that's going to violate safety and health of our students and staff, we are able to remove people from the learning environment. So I want to put that out there. One of the things that I've struggled with, and you heard me at the beginning of the presentation talk about, I believe it's important for our students to come back to school safely. I really do want that. But I am cognizant, if you look at the levels of what we had, we're asking a lot. And I know that school's going to be different. Emily, John, I know all of you, you look at things through different lenses, but ultimately it comes back to you as a parent looking out for your own children. I have my own children. My son went back to college yesterday. And so there's a lot of guidelines that are in place. My daughter's in high school, and I see exactly how she's also struggling in terms of where that decision is. But one thing I told my daughter was, you have to understand that the school you're going back to in this situation is not the one that you left back in March. And I don't say that to be scary. I say that to know that we have guidelines, and we need to stick to those guidelines and follow those, because that's how safety is going to be entailed. And so I worry that by that big focus, it may backfire in some ways, that we may turn kids off to school. Okay, it's really going to have to, and that's hard. It's hard for me. It's hard for our staff. It's hard for our families and our students to make that change. We're going to have to come at things differently. I have great belief in our staff and our teachers. They do amazing things. When they're given problem solving, they can come back to be able to try to change that. But there are going to be some of those things, John, that are non-negotiables. And those non-negotiables, when it comes back to, is, remember, we have all of these pieces individually together. We need every one of them together to help us get this done. And if they're not going to be followed, then there are situations that people will be removed from the learning environment.
Anything else, John? No. Would you like to go again, Kendra?
Oh, I have a lot.
I know you had a lot of questions, so I want to make sure I give you plenty of time.
Well, okay, let's look at the safety precautions. There's several in there, so I'll probably bunch them all together. But what happens if there's an outbreak in Maine or York County? Will we build extra weeks into our calendar to accommodate that? What happens to full classrooms and teachers if isolation becomes necessary? So for instance, we get one student or one teacher in a classroom that makes it necessary for everybody else that tests positive, and then everyone else, we're going to lose a whole classroom. So are they going to be, I have a lot more safety questions.
Sure. And that's a good place to start, because I want to at least go into what we've got in place that are part of our plan when someone is sick. So we want students and staff avoiding exposing others by staying home if they experience signs or symptoms or have a fever of 100.3 Fahrenheit or higher. It's important to know that students will not be penalized for missing school when they're required to stay home under these guidelines. As I mentioned in the presentation, school nurses will be the ones working with our students and our families. If a student develops a fever during school hours, he or she will wait in the school's designated medical isolation room until released to a parent guardian. Students and staff should not return to school until they are fever-free for 24 hours, one full day without fever-reducing medication, and symptom-free for 24 hours. Any area used by a sick person will be closed until proper disinfection has been completed. Now, what are the expectations when there is a COVID-19 test is positive? Okay. Parents or guardians will notify the school nurse if their child or anyone in their household has been confirmed to have COVID-19. Families and employees who may have been exposed will be notified according to the CDC guidelines. And under current CDC guidance, a student or staff member who has tested positive for COVID-19 will not be able to return to the school unit until they've gone 24 hours, one day without exhibiting symptoms of COVID-19, and at least 10 days have passed since their symptoms first appeared, or they have received 2 negative COVID-19 test results from specimens taken more than 24 hours apart, and they have provided documentation of medical clearance to return to school and submitted the same to the school nurse. Students and staff who have had close contact with someone who tests positive for or is diagnosed with COVID-19 must isolate at home and monitor symptoms for 14 days. Close contact is defined as any individual who has been closer than 6 feet for more than 15 minutes. Depending upon circumstances, exposure could include entire classrooms. okay? An entire team, an entire bus route, an entire playground grouping for et cetera. Students and staff returning from illness related to COVID-19 will be required to check in with the school nurse and school administrator. Staff returning from illness related to COVID-19 will be required to check in with Workwell. And the superintendent will work closely with Maine CDC and the school department physician regarding notification, contact tracing, and potential closings. And when students are out of school, arrangements be made to assist them so they don't fall behind in their learning. So for example, remote instruction or makeup work. And I'll say that right now through all of this, the Maine Department of Education has provided flexibility again, once again, in what we've got for school days. Okay, so sometimes there's a requirement that we need to have 175 school days. Under these circumstances, there's been some flexibility that's been given to be able to assist and help us with that.
So here's my concerns. You know, I'm not even going to put them in the form of a question so much as it's really, we're relying on a self-check by the students and their parents. And there's really no way to verify that. So, I mean, we really need to acknowledge that. And there are, frankly, a lot of reasons why they would not report that. You know, if I'm a stressed out parent and I have to go to work and my employer is counting on me being there, my child has a slight fever, you know, we may not just talk about it. So again, it's the quarantine part, but I also go in the classroom. Do all of our classrooms have sinks? And, you know, sanitizer is a good thing, but there's, you know, a few options like who supervises in the restrooms? And that goes for high school too. Who's going to supervise all these kids when they go into the bathroom? I mean, I know I've spent time with my younger grandchildren. I'm telling you, it's quite a task with each one of them to make sure, you know, that 20-second rule is, you better have eyes on. So how is a teacher really, who is going to supervise in the restrooms when they go? Who's going to make sure they wash hands before lunch? They'll probably use sanitizer, I assume. The other thing would be, you know, they need to wear masks, but they also are being taught to sneeze or cough into their elbow or use a tissue. Are there going to be tissues provided, like individual tissue packets, so that the kids, you know, if a kid's going to sneeze, they're not going to run up to one spot in the room. You know, it's all those things. And are these guidelines, and I think I have the answer to that, like you'll be sending these out to parents so they can start to prepare their kids in advance. And then when it comes down to absent students, obviously the nurses can't call them all, but there'll be aides that help call. Will every student who's absent get a phone call?
Typically, that's what we strive to do anyways. There may be situations where parents have already contacted us to let us know. In those particular cases, no. But in the situations where we haven't been contacted or it hasn't been done through the Frontline app, then I think, yes, we absolutely have to make sure that we're having those conversations with it. So, yeah.
Okay. Oh, and then finally into this category, how and when will testing for COVID symptoms happen? Do we have a collaboration with a testing site so that that can happen promptly? Because, you know, maybe a nurse might identify a child that probably has some symptoms or it's questionable. How do we make sure that that gets addressed right away?
So we do have a backup option for that as part of with our by contracting with our school physician through York Hospital. I think we do have the availability in those situations that are necessary. I got to be careful with that, where it wouldn't be something where we'd be testing all of our staff, for example, or all of our students, but there may be in those situations where we need that information. I feel confident based on our arrangement with them that we'll be able to come back and work something out so that it's information is not going to be detrimental or holding us back as a school department with that. Now, there might be options that people have through their own healthcare and their own physicians to be able to come back and do that. So I do think we have that safety net in the event that we needed it.
So I'll give others a turn. Those are my safety ones.
Got more, Emily?
I do. So I just want to recognize too that we ask so much of our teachers and staff and do in terms of time, using their own resources, their own money. We ask a lot of them. And so how are we going to prepare for a staff shortage? And has there been any consideration made to use either CARE funds or the Corona Relief Fund to, help with the staff shortage?
Sure. So if you notice in the report, I did look up there as one of the things that could impact us in our different models would be the availability of staff. And that is something that I think is a concern for us. We are looking at using those funds, CARES and CRF funds in a creative way. I don't think you're going to see us out advertising for new teachers as much as we are going to be looking at in my conversations with the union, because I don't want this to also fall on the backs of teachers to be added something that goes beyond what their expectation and their contract already holds. So we're going to be looking at, for example, offering extra compensation, extra stipends for people to be able to come in and do this work that goes beyond our hourly employees and our ed techs. You're going to see us offering extra hours, overtime hours for students. That works in that A, it helps us in these types of situations. B, it helps us with people that already know our kids. And C, it puts some extra money in their pocket. And so those are, we're looking with in terms, I met with the teachers union today for 2.5 hours. And we were talking about some of those things where we're able to help people step up and pick up, but they're also going to have to be compensated. We have systems in place with that, but those might have to be done in more of a COVID situation to be able to allow for that. And so those are some of the creative ways. I do worry about substitutes, okay? That is something that is a concern. We are looking at our current substitutes. We're reaching out to them to be able to see, are they interested in returning? We're also going to be putting together a proposal that's going to increase the sub rates, okay? And so we want to be able to do that in a creative way. So that people, if they want to be able to come and sub for us, then we want to be able to make sure that they're being compensated appropriately. We've got the ability that usually those are really challenging situations for us budget-wise, but that would be, to me, an important and a good use of the funds for us to be able to put that into place. We'd be looking at our substitutes where it wouldn't just be, hey, come on back. There would be an orientation and a training period. We would pay those people for that, but that would be something where we would be looking at trying to bring those people into the fold. I can tell you that in normal times, I would not want our principals bringing any substitutes in unless they had a specific assignment for a substitute. But under COVID-19, all hands on deck that we might be able to come back. Kendra, you asked a great question about, hey, we're going to have to be able to make sure that the bathroom use is coming back to be able to be looked upon. That's something that we're going to have to work out. I can't look at you and tell you right now we have that all figured out for that answer. But as we've been meeting with their administrators, we've been letting them know they have to look for, how is it going to mean people coming into our building? If we're going to be asking people to not use school transportation and drop kids off, we may have to be flexible in those times. We're going to need people there to be able to help supervise that. And so those are some of the things that we're looking at creatively to try to be able to get established that people will come back. I don't want our staff to feel like that they're required to. or they have to. Obviously, within our teaching contracts, there are duties. That has been something that is still going to be able to be part, but we can't rely on that to go totally put it all on the backs of our teachers and our staff.
More, Emily?
Yes.
Dive in. Keep it going.
Just going back to the hybrid model again, with if that's what we're doing for grades 5 through 12. As you know, we just revised our block schedule also, but will the blocks look, I would envision that the blocks may be a tinier bit shorter to allow a bigger passing time so that you're not having huge congregation in the hallways. So
Correct.
I am envisioning, dismissals by classroom to eliminate. Okay.
And that's what we've got our administrators working on. It can't be the class is ending, everyone just go pile out into the hallway.
Right.
So I know at the high school level, we are taking away Spartan time, and we're also taking away, remember we went from a block 5 to a skinny block 5.
Mm-hmm.
And so the plan is to remove that for this year coming up. I've let people know it's not going away forever. The intent is that it's coming back. It will allow us also, I think, more time to plan it to also be better. But you've got to find some of those creative ways to get people into hallways and to get people fed for lunch.
Yeah.
I know at the middle school, they're looking at, they have some guided reading times and some intervention times that it looks like their plan is to keep those things because that allows that flexibility to be able to help with in terms of people in the hallway, in lunch schedules, in dismissal schedules. We're going to have to be pretty flexible with our times in terms of we don't know what busing is going to look like, right? And so that's, I think any other school department who tells you they exactly know what it looks like on August 10th, I don't believe them. Okay, for us, that's real so that we're going to have to be able to adjust that so that you may find that teaching day might be changed, impacted on either end. If we're going to ask our K through 4 kids to come to school every day, and we are going to try to limit them in terms of the class that they're at, and we're going to have mask wearing, that's a big ask for a regular school day to be able to do that. We're going to have some flexibility there because you know how I mentioned a while ago, I don't want our kids being turned off to school either. Mm-hmm. And there's a balance there to be able to do that because yes, we're going to have instruction and content, but there's going to be a lot of there's going to be a lot of those things that are also going to be taking up some of that time.
Turning my focus, I'm sorry if I'm turning my focus on special education. And Stacy perks up. I just had some general questions, probably more about about how many students are we talking about here for receiving in-person everyday instruction, and well, maybe that's where I'll stop. How we're feeling about that. And then if anyone else has special ed questions, maybe instead of having Stacy leave, yeah.
So if I understand the question correctly, so we have 683 special ed students as of the child count. Today is what, Monday? Last Thursday. The majority of our students, we are anticipating offering the in-person services. I know that it was a significant struggle for a lot of our students and a lot of our families. And the thing about specially designed instruction is it's really hard to do that via Zoom.
Yeah.
I did reach out just recently and got an answer today, but just asking some of those questions to make sure my thinking, and which I've shared with Matt, we've all been working together, but just to get a definite from the main department commissioner. And her response was very simple. And she said, we are really suggesting and asking schools to look at providing in-person instruction for those students, especially where your county is in a green status. So I can't tell you the exact number of students just because I don't know how many families are going to choose not to be able or choose to go to the distance option. Both my assistant director, Tammy Delaney, and I have looked and provided to the principals the number of students that would be in special ed, say for reading instruction or math instruction in the regular ed classroom. We've given those numbers, and I'm meeting on Thursday with the junior high staff just to go over that so that we can make sure we're providing the physical distancing, the safety measures. I've already given those numbers to Matt Peterman, the principal, and those numbers are doable within the regular ed classes because we need to make sure that that works out too.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Stacy while we have her?
Yeah, and I have some other general ones, but will the contact between students be limited when only some of them leave when they leave the regular classrooms for specific support and then they return? So in other words, the students that get what you call pulled out of a classroom for some special instruction, then they go back to the regular classroom.
Yeah.
Are they going to be exposed to even more students in doing that?
The issue, in some cases, I would say yes, but it won't be a multitude of other students. The issue becomes, Kendra, that we have an obligation to provide a free and appropriate public education. So if I have a child who is 80% in the mainstream, but they have a disability in mathematics and they receive instruction in the resource room, because we are having regular education students have access to their general curriculum, we cannot do anything less for students that are identified with disabilities. And so we do have a variety of students that, because of their disability, are in self-contained programs. And we have already, for the last 3 years, really worked on a push-in model for, say, OT, PT, speech services, so that they're carried out throughout the classroom. But they're students that have most of their instruction in the mainstream will be part of that cohort. And they'll be in the classes, though, every Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And again, the numbers, I went through at least the high school where there's the most changing between classes, and listed out all of the regular ed teachers, what block they were teaching, where their special ed students were during their special ed instruction, and what was the impact in each classroom. And there was only 2 classes where the impact was more than 2 students. There were 2 classes that had 3.
So it would be easy to look at a student. If a student becomes ill, it's going to be kind of tracked where a student's been, who else they've been exposed to during that day.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Anything else for Stacy?
So, not for Stacy, but
Not for Stacy. Thanks, Stacy.
I would just like to really bring up, I'm concerned about the middle school for a variety of reasons. First, I don't fully understand why they're not going to go full in like the K-4. Because I really don't think that students, if we're doing hybrid, we have kids who are 10 to 13 years old on average that are going there. And then who is going to be with them? What kind of exposure happens on those off days? If they're only in school for 2 days, they're not going to be left alone, or they shouldn't be left alone, really. So there's going to be 3 days plus weekends. The vast majority of the time, they're going to be having to be with someone else to get their piece of the education. So that part worries me. And the big part that worries me is it's going to be, I remember moving into this school. I didn't move in, but I remember just how stressful and what a struggle it was for the staff when that happened. And that's going to happen again at this middle school. So we are now asking staff to not only try to make all of these accommodations, but also to walk into that school for the first time. And, you know, sometimes it might be the heat in the classroom doesn't work or the air conditioning at the beginning, whatever. But there's going to be all these little barriers and things to figure out. Teachers working together for the first time. It just concerns me to think that that can begin 4 weeks from tomorrow. So I'm putting that
Actually,
out there.
I'll tie into that because I think when Hannah Williams made the comment in the public comments.
And it has nothing to do with that.
I know it does, but Hannah actually made me think about that 5-6 versus the 7-8 to clump in 5 through 8, which I've always thought of that with that model. Anyways, 5-6 to me seems like it is a little bit of a different age group. Have you guys talked about that, or what was the discussion around that?
Yep. Steve, can I put you on the spot for that?
Steve loves being put on the spot. He likes the adrenaline.
It's past my bedtime a little bit. No, we did talk about that 5-6 and being similar to instruction as the elementary folks. But really when it came down to it was class size. Our class sizes in grades 5, 6, 7, and 8 are larger than what we see at the elementary level. And really it came down to a space issue.
It came down to what?
A space issue.
Space. Okay.
Class size and space.
Yeah, so you didn't look at it. You just couldn't find enough classroom space to really spread it out
Right.
and have it in person the entire time. Okay.
So is that going to be the case all year, that there's not really enough space in the classrooms at the middle school for them to properly distance?
Well, I was just going to add the other part to that is construction and the unknown. And so that may be something as we get into the building, and you highlighted the experience that we had coming into this building and how that is always going to be a transition. And so those are some things that we can monitor, but right now there's a lot of unknowns around that middle school project, from everything from what's going to be available and completed for that. And so that is also part of our thinking here, because we want to be able to rather bring people all in together all at once, where we might not be able to know that we can deliver on what those expectations and those safety precautions are going to be with that. And so that's, I realize and I agree. I'm not going to disagree that that is going to be challenging, and both developmentally for those students and their families. There's not disagreement when it comes for that.
Okay. I actually have a text-in question from our absentee member. Mr. Mapes just texted me, can SRTC students enter exit via their classrooms when it's available? So I think he means the external exits in and out of their classrooms to minimize contact.
Yeah, so that's one thing I've talked with Director Kathy Sargent, Assistant Director Mike Redman, in terms of typically all of our people might only exit a couple doors, and you'd have everyone coming in that way. And so we have to redesign that. And so there are options when you look at those programs where they can exit to go outside. And so those are things that we are looking for. You've got to also understand that safety is going to be a big piece of that to make sure that we can do that. But I think that's going to help with congestion in the hallway in terms of bringing people together, because in a lot of ways, those buses for SRTC and for our sending schools, they kind of need to leave on time. So if we were going to be stretching that out, this may allow us to allow people to come out as long as they're keeping the 6 feet distancing to be able to come back and enter on the bus. So that is something.
Good question, Jonathan. Kendra, do you have anything else down there?
Oh, well. Does anyone else have questions?
I have some comments. I was just holding off to the end. I want to make sure you guys all got everything in.
Well, okay, the, again, buses, if they have to make multiple trips, and probably Steve, this is going to be for you, your nightmare. But if buses need to make multiple trips to accommodate spacing on the buses, how is that going to look when students are arriving in the morning and leaving in the afternoon? Who's going to be supervising the kids? I mean, are some kids going to arrive late for the start of class? And are other students going to be at the end of the day left there for longer? And who's going to supervise that?
So I'll help with that. I think the answers to that are possibly, okay? And I say that not to be snarky, but I say that because we don't know yet in terms of what that schedule is. But what I can tell you is it may mean that our teachers have to redesign how they're delivering instruction at the beginning of that class because you may not have all the students who are there yet, right? It may not be what I'm used to because everyone I know is going to be there, but we're going to establish some bus schedules that are going to be doing our best to get as many people there safely as we can within the guidelines. And so you may have to have some situations where there are going to be buses that might have to be coming a little bit late. There might have to be those situations where they might have to leave a little bit early. And those are things that those types of disruptions in our school day, it's not uncommon for those to happen. Do we like it? No. But if we know about it, then we can plan accordingly to be able to maybe switch away how I'm going to be delivering a lesson so that it may not be impactful for someone, you know, whose bus, it wasn't their fault that their bus is coming at a time where it won't be right, it wouldn't be the traditional start of school for that.
Okay. Anything else right now, Kendra? You good? Emily?
Can you tell me a little bit more about what the tent, maybe outdoor classroom would look like? And is that a pre-K through 12 scenario?
Yeah, so right now we're exploring the idea for tents because that will be able to give us more options. So Willard School gets really hot in September. And so with masks on, we're going to have to be creative in what we've got for options to be able to move kids around, for example. We're going to be looking at Willard School, can that tent maybe go out in front of Willard School? There's an area there. It may also have to be maybe down near Cobb Stadium. At the middle school, we're looking at two locations. One at the other end of where the playground's going to be going in. And so that's back where the portables were towards the far end. I know the admin at the middle school is also looking at another tent on the other side to help when people are coming into school near the cafeteria to be safely on that end. At the high school, we're looking at outside of the cafeteria. I know when we had our Project Grad celebration here a couple of years ago, that was out there to be able to come back, and that was very helpful. At Carl J. Lamb, we're looking at it. Space is limited, but we do have the field out back, looking at the baseball field there. At Margaret Chase Smith, there's not a lot of space in the sense of unless we use that field that we have, which earlier in the construction report, I talked about some of the challenges around where that grass is. But those are the things right now that we are exploring. And we're talking about pretty significantly sized tents that will be able to be another resource for people to be able to come in and be able to use for everything that may mean lunch. It may mean before school, after school areas, during school for classes to be able to provide that flexibility.
It is 2020. We may get snow in September. Anything is on the table at this point. So.
Have we considered the revenue stream of renting these tents out for events on the weekend? Weddings, bar mitzvahs, bachelor parties? No.
Mr. Jameson, I will say this.
I'm a thinker.
So am I. And we're using to purchase these tents. I'm not trying to waste money, but it's going to be through funds that I do see that as being a resource to be able to help us beyond COVID-19 as well, in terms of what we're looking for. I see that as something that we're looking at the price to rent, and when we're looking at renting for the significant amount of time that we are, I think it makes
Purchase
sense
it,
for us
yeah.
to purchase, and then those will be some things that will also be things that could help us down the line.
Excellent. Kendra?
I have another. When I'm looking at the social emotional support for students, I mean, we hear about that all the time, getting the kids back into school. We're worried about their emotional and mental health. Will the COVID or the CARES money fund extra outreach workers that, you know, in the spring, I know there were students that never engaged. And I'm really worried about losing those students, especially the ones that maybe, I mean, they were in the 7th or 8th grade last year, they're heading to high school, they just fall off the radar. So I think it's going to, because hopefully this is all going to pass and the world will return to normal. I don't want to find that there were a whole lot of students who just fell off and we don't even know who they are and they never got their education. So is it possible for that money to fund extra outreach workers to really totally focus on the kids that are not engaging?
So, excellent question and excellent point, because that is a concern or worry that we have as well. I'm not sure that they would be able to hire an outreach worker that, for example, may become an employee of the Sanford School Department, but we may be able to look at contracted services. Okay, for us to be able to say, this is an arrangement that we can be able to have to be able to provide and help out our school counselors to be able to not have all this social emotional learning on their backs, that we can come back and look at what we have for resources. In terms of our school nurses, for example, we're also looking to provide them support. And probably instead of hiring that, we are looking to do contracting so that we can have CNAs come in to be able to be added to be able to do that. And the advantage of that contract is it allows us to navigate this COVID-19, because we all know in those situations where when we take on the employee, eventually that's going to come to an end. And those are always challenging because of the impact that oftentimes when people meet. We've talked about that with some of the grants we've been fortunate to get. The good news is we got a grant. The bad news is we're not always able to sustain it. So I look at that and some similarities between that and some contracted services that we can have out. As of right now, in full transparency, that's not something, we have looked at the CNAs for the nurses. We put that right now as a higher priority, but we haven't, as far as I know, yet looked into what that would look like for additional
And I would
outreach.
assume that it would be contracted, because I know that money runs out, but I think there are a lot of agencies that could do the hiring for that. So if that could be looked into, that would be great, because I think it's critically important that we do that.
Okay. Anything else from you, Emily?
Yes, I think I'll make this my last one because.
Okay.
But
Make it a good one then, Emily.
students who are in crisis in the moment in your school that need to be, you know, more one-on-one or restraint in any way, they're in crisis. What is the protocol for that at this point? I don't know if it's covered in this next, the return to work expectations, but that worries me. I mean, sure. I know that we have students in crisis and Stacy's pointing, so. But
Sure. Yeah, Stace, come on up. Okay. You're gonna have to deal with that, huh? Guess I must be.
Get a little bit of exercise, it's good.
So, we have gotten some guidance. As you know, all of special ed staff are trained in safety care or in the process if they're new, and we get retrained. every 2 years. We have explicit guidance from the safety care trainers around how we are to proceed. And we know that there are going to be some students, it's the last choice, but there will be students. And in those situations, we know what classrooms or what programs or what students it may likely occur more with. And that's where we're going to have, the goggles, the face shields, the gowns. What I can share is that there's been a lot of sharing that's gone on, especially between the directors and out of district placements, where those kids sometimes have more of a need for an environmental control as they're developing internal controls. And so there's a graph around PPE, what's the situation and what's the level of PPE you would need. Matt is aware of that as well, and I know we'll talk about it more on a COT, but we already know in our head that we're going to have additional equipment.
Thank you.
Protective equipment.
Thanks, Stacy. Good question, Emily. Mr. Rue, any last comments, questions? Kendra, anything from you?
I do recognize the time, but okay. I would just like to say, though, number one, I recognize the amount of work that has gone into all of this, and that there are so many things that can't be known, and everything is changing daily, hourly sometimes. I would just like to put it out there. I mean, right now we're sitting here, we don't know if we are going to have enough teachers. We don't know if we're going to have enough subs. We don't know, just so many things, okay, that we can't know. We don't even know when that middle school is going to be completed, or when students are going to get in. We know they're going to get in, but we don't know the challenges that are ahead with that. So in all these things tonight, we don't know what the data is going to be looking like in 4 weeks. We don't know how many kids are going to be riding the bus. We don't know how many parents are going to choose homeschooling or distance learning. So with all these unknowns, it's nobody's fault that there's all these unknowns. But I would just like to put it out there that whatever plan gets in place and whatever we vote on next week, people need to understand that could change. Because, I was saying earlier that, September's an artificial date right now. We're saying, you know what, we go back to school in September because we've always gone back to school in September. But that's, all bets are off right now. So I think it's very possible, until a lot of these questions are answered or things become more clear, I think it's very possible we may need to delay the start of school when we get closer to it. So I just want to put that out there. That's my way of thinking right now.
Thanks, Kendra. Like I said, I was kind of holding off my comments. I don't really have any specific questions. I'm more of the kind of the high level type look at all this. And I have to mirror what Kendra said. I mean, the amount of work that's gone into this is incredible. So Matt, you and your team, and I've been very impressed with the presentation. I think you handled all the questions from all of us very well. There wasn't a lot of hesitation. So to me, I'm looking for a sense of, that I'm comfortable, that you guys are ready to be up to the challenge, because it's a huge challenge. Kendra's right. Like, we don't know what's going to happen in 2 weeks, in a month. There's a lot of unknowns still, but you guys are, you're living, you're breathing this. And I know that first and foremost, it's the safety of the students and the staff. And as long as that's kind of the guiding principle, I'm much more comfortable with things. And I have brought concerns up. Once after that first meeting, the consistency in the protocols. You've addressed that. The PPE supplies, I know that's brought up by all of us. We need to have that continued supply coming in. And I'm also, I think you alluded to it, Matt, the in-person experience of the student. We want them back in school, but we want them back in a school that they're going to enjoy and learn at, and it's not just a prison. And I think you're well aware of that. And the contingencies, you're going to have contingency upon contingency, because you're not sure which way you're going to go. And I think at the end of the day, the families are going to have options. you know, if you're not comfortable with whatever level we're putting out there, you have that option to keep your kid at home. You know, and that's great. We talked about the 5th and the 6th grade cutoff. I still would like to kind of have that on the table still, just to think if there's any way you could figure out a way to have them in person the whole time, or maybe that's one of the first ones that you do kind of pull back in. So I think there is a delineation between 5 and 6 and 7, 8. You know, yet we have them in the same building now. So, and the only other thing I wanted to bring up now at this point is the timing of the decision. Because I know a lot of the stuff I've seen on social media is, you know, parents want a final decision. You know, so I guess that vote by us, which we have currently planned for next Monday, is that final decision. We do have the option to call an emergency meeting. So we could do something at the end of this week if we feel like we're going to have enough information at that point to make the decision, and to give those parents, you know, a couple more days to make that decision. So I'm not sure how the rest of the board feels about that, whether they think that's an option. You know, we only need 24-hour notice to make that decision. So we could do that tomorrow or the day after and still do it by, you know, Thursday or Friday. So I just kind of want to put that on the table, mostly so people at home know that that's also an option.
I guess my question is, Don, why in lieu of not just the regular meeting on next Monday?
Well, then when we announce the meetings, we need a certain amount of time ahead of time to do it. But when there's a certain issue like this, we have the latitude to make an emergency meeting and do it with only 24-hour notice. So
I think until we have a vote on parents, and people aren't going to be able to make their decisions, teachers who think they need accommodations, parents knowing if their kid's going to take the bus, parents knowing what model they're going to choose. And then the survey that Matt talked about sending out, I think is going to be a good response, and we're going to get a lot of answers. That's why I'm talking about we need to be flexible even once we vote. So if we were going to have another meeting or an emergency meeting, I would prefer to continue with our meeting Monday night and try to get some of these questions answered, but then put out the survey to the parents with a deadline of next Wednesday or Thursday, and then hold another meeting. So have a meeting real soon after the time we take a vote so that we can learn more, because we just don't know.
Yeah, Matt?
Yeah, a couple of things. One, some of my thoughts are some of the things that I think, to me, are takeaways for me tonight, and they all are. But I've heard the idea about maybe 5th and 6th grade. That's something I think we might want to look into maybe a little bit more. I'm still worried that there's a lot of other variables and factors out there that make that difficult. The curriculum for our K through 4 for the full distance learners, that's something that has to be more. I'm also curious to see, based after the presentation, the types of questions that will be coming up for school info. What I plan to do for those is still forward those on to the school committee so you can get a flavor of the questions that are coming up as well. And then I think that may help us in terms of guiding us rather than the emergency meeting doesn't feel particularly right, but I understand the reasons why, because people want a decision. But I think if we could look at it that way, that might help us. And then the other thing I've tried to put forward in that plan is that there is some agility for us to be able to keep some flexibility and keep moving in terms of what some of the factors are that present to us. So those are some of my takeaways, to say that maybe an emergency meeting, I'm not sure we're going to get all of that being able wrapped up that quickly, but I think it's a goal for us by next Monday. And we'll also have I'm not calling it a survey as much as it is almost a required form for people to help us for planning, and to put that beyond next Monday. And I also think, as we start to look at our schedule for school committee meetings, having another one probably ongoing wise, I know it's a huge commitment for people, but I think the circumstances call for it to make it necessary for us to continue to be able to monitor and stay on to this the best that we can.
Okay, sounds good. Any final comments from anybody? Okay, then we'll wrap that one up. What are we doing on time? Because we do officially need to be wrapped up by 10. We'll see if we can zip through everything else pretty quick. What do you think, Matt? Next item is the school committee schedule proposed for 2021.
Don, I'm sorry. Did we do the return to work guidelines for staff? Is that something?
That was part of in the plan.
It was.
part of
With
the
that,
presentation,
yeah, that was going to be part of that. It's a link for people to be able to go to it.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay. Let's make the motion that we approve the schedule as proposed. Do I have a second? Second, any discussion? All in favor? All in favor. Okay, and next we have the Sanford Adult Ed Director position shared with SAD 60.
Yep,
Is there
so
anything,
that's something that we've talked about before. And so that's going to be, I did have some backup material that went to you for that. In terms of, we're looking at sharing that position with SAD 60. And we've been working with the admin at SAD 60 for that. And I talked about, as we come back, of what we're trying to be able to do with that. That would also include having a contract that would be going with SAD 60 with that. We're also, as part of that, would be along with that, also changes to the academic and vocational coordinator position, which we also think would be able to assist with this. This is something that we have explored in the past, so I'm open to any questions that people may have for that.
Why don't I'll put a motion out to approve the proposal as presented. Do I have a second? Second, discussion? Any questions? I know we've talked about this a couple
I just want to
times.
say, I think it's very well thought out. It's a win-win, and I think we are very, very happy to have Nicole Ivy, who is willing to take this on, and I know she'll do a good job. So, yeah,
And just I'll be a Budinsky just on top of that. I agree with that, Kendra, but I want people to know this agreement, it's a one-year agreement. And it's something that at the end of the day, we'll evaluate that. We're very confident. We think it's going to be in the best interests of us, but we're protected in the event that it's not. So I think there's a lot of potential here that's going to be able to come back and be helpful. So
I just want to say to Nicole, hits it out of the park, but I love this. Thank you for clarifying that it's just a 1 year, but I love this way of thinking out of the box. This, I think, is a good step in that, a good first step. So I really appreciate the outside thinking and collaboration between us and another school district.
That's a good point, Emily. Okay, any more discussion? All in favor? All in favor? Okay, Kay, we have no old business. Resignations. Would you like to announce resignations, Mr. Nelson?
yeah, and remember, this is the first meeting that we've had since June. So we do have some resignations that have come up over that. And there's been a couple big ones here that are an impact for us. I mean, they all are to a certain extent. Pam Cody is an ELA teacher at Sanford Middle School. Allison Denault is a social worker here at the high school. Melinda Gaumont is a social worker at the middle school. We had a couple coaching resignations. Ashley LaValle for JV girls volleyball. Nate McClellan is an assistant football coach. Amy Patello is a science teacher at the high school, resigned. Also a big one for us, Ty Bryant, our facilities director, submitted his resignation. Ty's a great asset and a great resource for the Sanford School Department. He's agreed to stay on until we can be able to get his replacement. We have advertised for that. We do have applications. I'm encouraged by the applicant pool. We're in a point where we're trying to be able to set up those interviews so that we can bring someone on. Jessica Rice is the support and transition room here at the high school. Jessica was only with us this past year, but she made a very positive impact for that. And then also Nancy Turgeon, another loss for special ed tech here at the high school. And then Ashley Wakefield at food service.
Okay, best wishes for everybody, and thanks for your service. Staff appointments.
Yeah, we have a lot of those that you can see are for our kitchen personnel, for our summer food service program. For that, we also have an ed tech for pre-K for us to replace Carla. We're also, Katrina Hartford is coming back for us as a custodian at MCS. We also have Scott House as an ed tech for technology to help throughout the district, and a number of other kitchen people and some for the summer food service program, as well as some grade level leader positions for a grade level leader for grade 5 and the visual and performing arts chair at Sanford Middle School.
Excellent. Transfers.
Yeah, we have a number. A lot of these fall into the area of food service. They also fall into some of our special education ed techs supporting for people for that. I did want to also point out that Christy Crowley is going to be moving from a grade 3 teacher position to the district K-4 literacy coach position for that as part of a number of transfers.
Excellent. And nominations.
Yep. So if you remember back on June 1st, you did allow me to offer contracts and teachers to fill the vacancies during the summer. So we have extended contracts to Jennifer Bartlett as the career planning coordinator at SRTC, Kimberly Bate as a kindergarten teacher at CJL, Hunter Brannon as a grade 3 teacher at Willard, Kathleen Gagnon as a resource room teacher at the elementary, Roshan McGuckin as a grade 4 teacher at Carl J. Lane.
Excellent. Welcome aboard. Okay, policies. Can we table these till the next meeting, or do we want to go through these tonight?
I was just going to ask, is it possible to make a motion to table the policies that are the first reading, but we could take care of the second reading policy that's for the, I believe it's for the English for other languages?
Sounds like an excellent recommendation.
Is it possible to do that?
I think we can do that.
I understand the time situation, but I think in terms of where we're talking, this is pretty timely, I do think. So I think, because if we do have our meeting next week, we will not be able to take a second reading that close behind. So I think it's important for us to be able to get these going, correct?
Gotcha.
So are you saying that if we take both of these this evening, the first readings of policy AC and ACAA and ACAAR, and it looks like also ACAB and ACBAR, can we defer those second readings next week? Like, can we hold off a week, or we're going to have to take those up? We can hold off that week. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I would say too, if Steve, you could just give us a basic synopsis, which you wrote out and it's very clear, because they were sent out in advance. I know I, for one, have looked at them very thoroughly. I don't know about others, so I'd feel comfortable voting.
For the first reading.
For the first, yeah.
For the first one?
You're talking for the first reading.
The
first reading.
I've looked at them all, but are we doing just the first?
Right. That's
yeah.
We're doing all of them. Okay. So
the first one
with the second reading, is there any adjustments since the first reading?
The second reading on procedure IHBEA-R. This is the updated LAO procedures, which has to do with our ELL students. And it just basically brings us into compliance with the state regulations for ELL program. And there's been no change since the last reading, so I recommend that.
Yeah, I'll make the motion to adopt policy IHBEA-R. Do I have a second? Second for Mr. Rue. Any discussion? All in favor? All in favor? That one's done.
Now, the policies and procedures in regards to Title IX There's been some major changes in regards to Title IX under the Trump administration. And so I'm just going to read what I have here. The Title IX statute says that no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any educational program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. The new Title IX regulations issued on May 6, 2020 address sexual harassment for the first time. Other forms of sexual and gender discrimination covered under Title IX besides sexual harassment are unaffected by these new regulations, and the existing Title IX requirements pertaining to them remain. Under the federal Title IX regulations, sexual harassment includes the following conduct on the basis of sex, which takes place within the context of the school unit's educational program and activities. Quid pro quo, a hostile environment, or sexual assault, dating violence, domestic violence, and stalking, as these terms are defined by federal law. Aside from the significant changes in the definition of sexual harassment, the regulations only apply in the context of school programs and activities. The regulations now address employee-to-student harassment, student-to-student harassment, and employee-to-employee harassment. School units must respond when they have actual knowledge of sexual harassment. Actual knowledge means a report to the Title IX coordinator, an official with authority to take corrective action, and any K-12 school employee. Once the school unit has a report, they must respond following the Title IX requirements. There is a difference between a report and a formal complaint. Upon receiving a report, a school unit must offer supportive measures to the alleged victim. These are what previously were referred to as interim measures, such as no contact orders, changes to class or work locations, etc. Must consult with the alleged victim about the supportive measures, explain the formal complaint process to the alleged victim. Generally, a school unit does not need to act beyond these steps unless it receives a formal complaint. A Title IX coordinator can file a formal complaint in circumstances. So these are general. The changes in the definition of sexual harassment is now included in Title IX. We need to have a Title IX coordinator, which we've had in the past, but the complaint and the investigation procedures are just much more detailed than they were in the past. And so we've updated all of our policies, policy AC, policy ACAAH, policy ACAB, and the accompanying procedures to bring us into requirements into those Title IX regulations. So,
okay, I'll make a motion to accept the first readings of policies AC, ACAA, ACAA-R, ACAB, and ACAB-R. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Kendra. Okay, discussion?
I do have a question, and I don't think it's going to change the policy. I'm just curious that when we're looking at the regulations only apply in the context of school programs and activities, and they now address employee-to-student harassment, student-to-student harassment, and employee-to-employee harassment. So what if it's a student harassing an employee? Is that more covered under student discipline?
It's covered under student discipline. That's what would come under.
Okay, so that's why it's not.
Yep.
Because I know that can happen and has happened.
Right.
I'm not saying here, but I know it does. So that's why it's under student discipline.
Yep.
Great.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor? All in favor. First reading's done. Okay, items for future agenda? Anything anybody wants to put out there? No, we're good. Calendar announcements. So as of right now, we'll have a meeting next Monday, the 17th, at 6 p.m. And then we'll put one in for the 24th. Is that what we're talking about?
Did we say the 24th?
Yeah. Okay. Is that it? Rest of the
I'm
group?
sorry,
Is that,
what was that again?
well, right now we've got the 17th down for a meeting, but then we discussed having one again on the 24th.
A week after that, is that what people's wishes are?
That seems prudent, I think.
Yeah, if need
I think
be,
it's going to be
definitely.
necessary.
Yeah, okay. And then once we get into September, we have the 14th and the 21st as Labor Day is the 7th, right? Yeah. Okay, recommendation to adjourn?
So moved.
Can I just say a closing comment first?
Go right ahead.
I always wondered why we don't have kind of closing comments like city council does.
Because we've already had like 3 hours of meeting.
I know, but
In general, see, the city council needs to fill space because they haven't done anything.
I know, poor Matt's like, shut up, Emily. I just want to say that, I reiterate what I said earlier today. I kind of posted it on social media that I recognize this is incredibly difficult decision for us and an incredibly difficult decision for parents. And I hope that people, when they're making their decisions, that they recognize that they're making their decision. There's no wrong decision. You're doing the right thing for your family, and that we should be all supportive of each individual's decision, and know that this is something that you could. I hope I speak for all of us that you can. Reach out to all of us. You can lean into us. I would say that we as a community should all be leaning on each other. This is a community effort. But don't ever feel guilty for parents at home that are watching, making a decision that's right for your family and what works best for you. And then just above all, remember to be kind to each other.
Well said, Emily. Okay, all in favor of adjourning? Adjourned. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you, Emily. That's nice.